Marketing for GTWS Racing. They both go deep into the corner. It's been approximately 10 months since we've had the pleasure of welcoming you to the GEDLICH Racing Winter Series. We are back for the opening of the 2025 European season, and we do so at the Circuito do Estoril with three of our categories: the GTWinterSeries for the fastest racing supercars that money can buy, the GT4 Winter Series, and the LMP3 cars of the Prototype Winter Series. Myself, Adam Weller, here in the commentary box with Andy McEwen alongside me. Izzy Browning is down in pit lane as well. This is the circuit we're contending with, just under 4.2 kilometres and 13 turns, 9 of which are in a right-hand direction, which means those left tyres are getting a workout around this circuit. The conditions are pretty favourable for mid-January, it must be said, 13 to 12 degrees Celsius all day long. It's a perfect start to the season. Contrast from last year where it rather kicked off with the monsoon, but this time around, low wind speeds, nice temperatures. Cold tyres will be a problem. We've seen some of that in qualifying and in the practices and in the collective test sessions on Thursday and Friday as well. People struggling to get heat into the tyres early on. But I think we are going to have some very good racing in all three of our classes. We will be kicking off with the GT4 Winter Series, all three categories with one race today. Half-hour sprint for the GT4s and the GTs, and the prototypes with their first of two 50-minute encounters. We are about 15 minutes away from seeing the cars head out onto the grid for the first time. Delighted to have Andy McEwen with us. You were alongside me for the season finale at Barcelona last year. We've roped you in for some more in 2025.
It took very little persuasion, I can assure you. I really enjoyed that final round at Barcelona, and yeah, nice to be here at least for the first half of the season this year as well. And what a great place to open up the 2025 Winter Series. Estoril, looking glorious out there. It feels a lot warmer than 13 degrees. That is possibly because we are British.
Yeah.
This is the warmest it's been for about 6 months in the United Kingdom. But yes, it feels quite warm out there. It's a lovely day for racing tomorrow. We believe maybe a bit more challenging, but in a way, that's not a bad thing for the drivers. This is a winter series. It is almost a kind of a way of going pre-season testing whilst doing a bit of racing alongside. So actually getting a bit of a view of the full spectrum of weather conditions isn't necessarily a bad thing. They've got lots of dry running today, as was the case yesterday. Maybe those wet weather tyres will be needed on the Sunday. But yeah, expecting some good racing. The GT4 race that's coming up first in particular, really excited for that. Qualifying looked really tight. There are 3 or 4 cars that I think will all be in contention. And hopefully that continues across all 3 classes.
Yeah, absolutely right. GT4 Winter Series made its debut here 12 months ago. The first ever race for the GT4 Winter Series. It was a barn burner, and we had several more before the conclusion of the season in Barcelona. This is the biggest ever year for GEDLICH Racing's Winter Series, with 7 events being held over the next couple of months. Of course, we have 5 events for the main Winter Series categories that you're familiar with. The GTWinterSeries, the GT4s, the prototypes, and the formulas, which will be joining us for the first time at Portimao in a couple of weeks. We also have the new for 2025 6-hour races at Portimao and Barcelona. The first weekend of February for the 6 hours of Portimao. Some very exciting and prolific teams entered into that one from the more endurance-centric side of the GT racing spectrum. And then on the in the middle of March, on the 15th and 16th, we will have the finale of the GEDLICH year, that being the final 6-hour race of 2025 for us. So 2 new additions there, a new racing format to come later in the year in the form of the 6-hour. Which is really exciting to have. We're always looking for new ways to improve the product for our drivers. As you said, Andy, weather security is a big deal here. This picture that we have on screen at the moment is not one you'll find at Alton Park at present, unfortunately. Indeed, a lot of our teams, of course, much like the GEDLICH organisation, coming from Germany or surrounding nations as well. Northern Europe just not really providing this kind of weather in January.
No, exactly so, and particularly because a lot of these teams will be looking at a European schedule this year where they would like to think the weather conditions would be more akin to this. This is a really good opportunity for them, as we've said, to gather some useful data, and that certainly will be a part of it, but also just for the drivers to get their eye in. Pre-season testing is one thing, and pre-season testing in Southern Europe is nothing new. Teams have been doing that for a long time, but to actually have the chance to not only set up the cars and gather data in that regard, but also to get your eye in, or keep your eye in, with regards to racecraft. That is really, I think, the big selling point of this. And look, there are worse places that you could be spending the bulk of your January and February. So no doubt it is going to be popular again this year. We're expecting more cars to come along, I think, for the next few rounds down in Portimao as well. And it is a fantastic idea, this, that GEDLICH Racing have come up with. And looking forward to seeing what the story of 2025's Winter Series has in store for us.
Yeah, absolutely correct. The GT4s, as we said, will be out first. We expect them to run in about 7 minutes' time out onto the grid, where they will be joined by Izzy Browning. Obviously, the Circuito do Estoril traditionally now is our starting point, and that is the case again in 2025. One of the key things that we should highlight coming into this is that in the GT4 Winter Series last year, we had an Aston Martin, a Porsche and a Mercedes taking a win. So 3 different manufacturers taking the win there. In the GTs, in the very first race of the year in 2025, we had a bit of a giant killing performance with Andrzej Lewandowski of GT3 Poland winning a race in a Super Trofeo spec car. And then after the Lamborghini, it was a Ferrari and a Mercedes. Also in the Prototype Winter Series, a Duquesne and a Ligier both took a win apiece as well. Points towards a circuit that is, shall we say, quite neutral in terms of the cars it favours. Yes, there's a lot of twisty sections around here. There's also that kilometre-long main straight, which gives the cars with extra ponies a little bit of a strong area as well.
Which is very much what we saw with the Lamborghini that you just mentioned last year, and there is a chance, I think, of a repeat of that later this afternoon in the GT Winter Series race as well, but more on that a bit later on. That long straight does mean that you wouldn't necessarily think of Estoril as being a horsepower circuit necessarily, but when it comes to racing, being quick in a straight line is always a good thing. And so that long run down into turn number 1, that is where you see the majority of overtaking here. So if you've got a few extra ponies under the hood, that will help you in your quest to either gain or defend positions. And then as long as you're not making too many mistakes around the rest of the lap, it should be possible to stay in front from there. But it's a fabulous circuit for racing. One obvious overtaking opportunity, sure, but there are places that, if you're feeling brave and your car's underneath you, you can try and make some moves on the infield section. And there are some technical bits, particularly in the last sector, that can sometimes generate mistakes. And that always keeps the on-track action even more exciting. So yeah, good place to start racing. It's got a bit of everything, lots for the teams and drivers to learn, and hopefully they'll put on a good show for us whilst they're doing so.
And even in these half-hour races that the GTs and the GT4s are partaking in, the 2 sprints that each category will partake in before their respective pit stop races, a 60-minute race for GT4, a 55-minute race for GT at the tail end of this weekend. But even in the half-hour race, I was being told earlier on by Owen Hizzy, who joins us from SVG Motorsport in the GT4 Winter Series, he said at the end of that half-hour, the tyre deg is a problem. Obviously, the front left gets a workout around a circuit like this where it's so right-hand predominant, the load going to the front left quite a lot. But he also made the observation that for their car, at least, the Ginetta G56 GT4 Evo, that is 3 times that they have to go into first gear throughout the layout as well. 3 acceleration zones from first gear, which means tyres spin up quite easy to do. You can really start to roast those rear tyres a bit over the course of a race distance, even a fairly short one.
And it's often temperature rather than wear that is the issue. If you increase the temperature in a tyre, the pressures leap up, and the higher the pressure is really, once you go beyond a certain point, the less rear traction you have. So then you spin the tyres up more easily, and then it's a vicious circle. So yeah, managing those tyres is something important. And for a lot of these drivers who maybe haven't done a lot of racing outside of the UK, if they are looking for a European season later on in 2025, that's definitely something they'll need to try and get on top of. So another key thing to learn from the races in this winter series, should the remainder of the season take place in similar conditions to these anyway. Getting a good view here as well on the live stream pictures of the infield section of the track. There is one of those acceleration zones out of, what's that turn? 5, I believe. 4, excuse me. Out onto the kink underneath the bridge on the back straight, if you like. And that leads down into another big braking zone. Quite tough on brakes, Estoril. There aren't necessarily a lot of big braking zones, but the ones that we do have tend to come at the end of very long straights and often downhill. You can really see from this angle here on the left-hand side of shot, that's the direction from which the cars will be coming. It's a steep downhill braking zone. There is a bit of runoff area now on the outside of that corner, which there never used to be, but already this weekend I've seen quite a few drivers getting that wrong and ending up using all of that runoff area and sometimes even skirting the gravel. So easy to get that braking zone down. The next braking zone is also a downhill one too, and of course into turn 1 you're dropping downhill as well. So wouldn't be at all surprised, Adam, to see a few drivers miscalculating that, particularly if they're in a slipstream, which they may not really have experienced in testing.
That's the thing, isn't it? And I mean, turn 1 is a corner that I've had it explained to me before as like a phantom braking zone, in that it can shift 10 to 20 meters when you need to finally slam the brakes on, depending on the tailwinds or the crosswinds. Thankfully, as we saw on the kind of weather breakdown earlier on, there's not much wind to consider today. It's a fairly still day here just outside Lisbon. What a wonderful area this is around the circuit as well. Lots to see, lots to do. A very large casino, which the likes of myself can't afford to indulge in, but maybe some of our drivers. The largest in Europe,
someone told me yesterday.
Indeed, yeah. I think it might have been me. So I don't know if I believe that. But yes, it's a fabulous circuit. 13 times in both 2- and 4-wheeled racing. It has hosted a Portuguese Grand Prix, of course, Formula 1 and, well, MotoGP, 500cc as it was prior to that. And as we saw last year, yes, there are the obvious overtaking zones, turn 1 being the most obvious of them. Parabolica interior, turn 6, that is also a very good overtaking opportunity. But we also saw some surprises. The Gancho chicane, which is just after our camera shot that we're looking at the moment. If you get a good run through the right-hand kink that we're currently looking at, you can spring a surprise and dive to the inside. That's exactly what we saw Jamie Day, who would ultimately be the champion of this last year's GT4 Win Series, do to win the first race of the season, and that's a point worth making as well. Of course, all these things are circumstantial, but we like a statistic. The race winner of race number 1 in 2024 was indeed the champion.
Well, there's definitely something to be said, I think, for getting off on the right foot, isn't there? And building some momentum at the start of the season. You know, if you win that first race, maybe it does mean that you approach the next couple of races slightly differently. You start to realise, hang on, we've got a shot at this. I'm sure there are quite a few rather confident driver pairings, though, anyway, most of whom have qualified towards the front of this grid. We can see the cars now are making their way out onto the circuit, by the way, so they will do a lap, line up on the grid, and Izzy Browning will be ready and waiting to have a chat, hopefully, with a few of those drivers. But just looking at the front end of this field, Adam, Josh Rattigan on pole position. We know how rapid he is. Directly behind him will be fellow British young charger Charlie Hart, who's fresh out of Ginetta Junior Racing. Enrico Federer, he's been quick in the past as well. They're the top 3 drivers on the grid, and very, very little to choose between them. It was, 0.4 of a second covering the top 3 cars, in fact only 0.6 of a second, covering the top 4 with Alon Gabay starting 4th on the grid for WNS Motorsport. So a really competitive front end of the grid, and they are all, I'm sure, drivers who are thinking, well, if we're doing the whole season, we've got a real shot at winning it, and that starts now.
Exactly, and a lot of the time you'll see drivers or teams that put their money down for the first couple initially. We'll see how it goes, and we'll talk about Valencia onwards if we're in the championship hunt. I know there's a couple of teams that are in that mindset. It's like, well, if we're winning, we have to keep showing up. The, you know, competitors' unwritten rule there. You'll notice in the GT4 Winter Series that there are a few cars that we don't usually get to see anymore. There are Cayman Trophy cars, which are slightly sub-GT4 specification Porsche Cayman GT4 CS in Club Sport specification. The main differences between them and the WNS Motorsport Porsche Caymans that are running in Pro and Pro-Am. The full-fat GT4 car has a 4-litre engine. The Cayman Trophy spec cars, both of which we can see on camera right now. Very good pickup, Mr. Director. Those are 3.8 litres, so a little bit less power. They've also got a slightly differing suspension setup. It's maybe just a few percentiles closer to a road car versus a GT4. However, we saw last year they can start to get involved in battles up in the top 5 if things fall a certain way. The other thing, as we can see them now just coming into this shot as well, the slightly older cars. You see there an original recipe Aston Martin V8 Vantage GT4 and a slightly older F82 BMW M4 GT4. Those are both a part of the club class, which allows GT4 cars of an expired homologation to come into the series, and that means that we have the rather wonderful Muka Motorsport car, the orange machine of Thilo Goss, at the wheel, or well, at the wheel of that car, the number 700, and then the 32 Monteros Competición car, the M4 F82, which I think they purchased a matter of days ago. So that car, brand new to them. Thilo drives that car about 30 weekends a year, so anything but new to Thilo Goss. He enters pretty much any German championship that the car is eligible for, and not being content with that, he's now here in the GT4 Winter Series. But the club class, another way to make sure we're getting as many cars involved, as many potential owners involved as possible, and allowing a bit more diversity and machinery on the grid.
And they may be on the back row of the grid together, those two, but they were only just over 0.2 of a second apart in qualifying, so that could be an interesting little battle going on if we can drag our eyes away from what I'm sure will be an enthralling fight for the win overall. That club class, I think, could be quite competitive. They say, don't they, you only need 2 cars to make a race. Well, those 2 cars could give us a very entertaining race a little bit further down the grid. Speaking of the grid, cars are now gridded up. Teams will descend upon them to have a little chat with the drivers and make any final preparations. I can see Izzy is preparing herself to go and have a meander down the pit lane as well. And in fact, I believe we can head down to her now. So Izzy Browning, over to you.
Hello, everyone. For the very first time in the 2025 Winter Series. Super excited to be here and super delighted to say it is absolutely beautiful weather down on the grid, as Adam and Andy have alluded to already. We are expecting a little bit of rain tomorrow, so make sure you stick around to see what happens with that. But as they have already said, we have got the first race of the day, and that is the GT4 Winter Series. Now, the GT4s gave us so much to look forward to last year, so we are expecting the same this year. Of course, we've got the team where Joel Mesh took the vice champion, or was the vice champion last year. That team, SR Motorsport, back on the grid and back on the front row. Our pole sitter is rolling in now. That is the number 77 elite of Josh Ratikin. We're going to try and grab a word with him in just a second, but the number 11, we'll go to him first because he's been sitting there for a little while, so he should hopefully be ready to talk, is Enrico Federer. Now, Enrico was in this GT4 Winter Series last year, but he was actually in the Cayman Trophy class, so stepped up to the pros this year, and he is the GTC race sprint champion. So Enrico, can we just can we jump in, have a little bit of a word? Thank you very much, Shamo. Enrico, how are we going? I mean, first race and you've got the best view down to turn 1, don't you?
Yeah, so it's the first race of the season and the best view of the starting grid, so I'm really looking forward to the race, and I think it's going to be a good race.
And nothing to lose and everything to gain, so how do you fancy your chances against a pretty quick McLaren?
So I think we have a really good chance. The BOP is not on our side, but I think we have a good chance to win.
All right, well, we wish you best of luck and have fun out there. All right, so there is our P2. Thank you very much to the Schnitzlaum guys for letting me have a little bit of a chat. Now, I've not got the boards anywhere, so I have to rely on someone in my ear to tell me how long we have got left of this grid walk. I can see that the teams are starting to leave the grid, but I haven't seen the 1 minute board yet. The Elite McLaren is just being spoken to by the race director. This is our race director here. So I will jump in when I can with Josh Rattigan, but they are on this grid once again with a different lineup and an exciting lineup as well. Josh is the reigning GT4 European champion, and he'll be with Mackenzie Cresswell, who is stepping up from single seaters into GTs. So let's see if I can jump in. Can I jump in with Josh really quickly? Thank you. Josh, pole position. I mean, you've announced yourself in this in the GT4 Winter Series, and great to have you with us. How are you feeling ahead of the race?
Yeah, we're definitely feeling strong. Obviously, it's my first time properly doing a Winter Series before. Obviously, everything's going really smooth so far. Obviously, massive thank you to everyone that's obviously put this together. Yeah, it's going really well. Obviously, never done, like I say, the Winter Series. It's a bit different. Obviously, got a bit of challenge in with the Mercedes, but I reckon if we just keep our cool, we'll be okay.
Well, you think that the Mercedes is going to be a challenge for you. He's just said the same thing about you to me. So, which one of you's really got the edge on this track?
Like I say, I've never been here before. I think I did one test about 2 years ago, so obviously it's a whole new stepping stone for me. But like I said, as long as I keep my cool like I did in obviously European GT4, we took the championship. I'll just do the same again, keep my cool and just drive on.
And of course, you the more experienced driver of your driver pairing. Of course, Mackenzie will be racing his first time in a GT4. So are you kind of taking all the learning you can get today to hand over to him tomorrow?
Yeah, obviously a massive well done to Mackenzie. He's done a great job so far. Jumping into the car 2 days ago and straight on pace within a few temps. So a massive well done to him. I've given a few more laps in the car to obviously take that stepping stone, but really good job.
All right, best of luck. We'll wish you best of luck. All right, I think we are about to get this race underway, so we will go up to commentary after this quick ad break.
And so we are rolling on the formation lap. It is the first GT4 Win Series race of the year. Elite Motorsports Joshua Rattigan on pole position. He is alongside Enrico Federer on the front row of the grid. Then it is Charlie Hart from Rafa Racing by Race Lab alongside WNS Motorsports Alan Gabay. Row 3 of the grid, Maximilian Hewitt in 5th position for the Racing Spirit of Lamar team. The American racer joined by a fellow American, Tim Horrell, in the number 30 Porsche. Joachim Bulting in 7th place alongside Luisa Kalla. She is the first of the Cayman Trophy cars there, entered under SR Motorsport. In 9th position, it is Ravi Ramyeed. They're now an invitational class entry. It's the brand new Evo spec BMW M4 GT4. It was originally meant to be a Pro-Am, now running invitational alongside Mark Ellman in the number 82 Ginetta from SVG Motorsport. In 11th place, it is Peter Lobeck alongside Willy Kuhne. on row 6 of the grid. Kuna in another one of those SR Motorsport Cayman Trophy entries. Enrique Oliveira in 13th place, and Tilo Gus at the back of the field in the rather lovely OG 4.7 litre naturally aspirated Aston Martin Vantage GT4. So the first of our Pro Class cars is the Elite Motorsport number 77. The first of the Pro-Ams is the number 30 car of Tim Hurrell. The first of the AMs, the only AM on the grid, is the number 38 Plus Line Racing Team entry. The first of the Cayman Trophy cars, as we already alluded to, is the number 111 car, that being driven by, I think it's actually meant to be Mikael Sander. I think the graphics are the wrong way round on that front, but we are just moments away from rolling here. And let's see how this one folds out, Andy. Half an hour of racing. This time 12 months ago, we had one of the best races of the season to kick off the GT4 Winter Series year.
Yeah, fingers crossed we get the same again. The ingredients are all there, aren't there, certainly. So hopefully a clean first corner. That's always a bit dicey here at Estoril. It's a long drag into a real pinch point at turn 1. And the start is going to be crucial. When the lap times are as close as they were in qualifying, Adam, all of those front drivers know the significance of getting in front of their opposition early. So it could be a feisty first braking zone. Hopefully it's a clean one.
Yes, hopefully so. In the case of Enrico Ferderer on the outside of the front row, he is a champion in the GTC race and GT60, GT4 categories, a double champion last year in Germany. Joshua Ratikan is a champion in the GT4 European Series Silver Cup, and they're both with the exact same teams that they competed with in the summer of 2024. So it's an all-championship front row. It's Ratikan on the inside with pole position for Elite Motorsport. Ferderer versus Ratikan. Down to the first corner. Looks like a good start from Tim Hurrell there. Further back, both W&S cars getting a brilliant start. I think it will be Josh Ratikan, though, that leads the way early doors. The 71 car getting into it a little bit there, as well as a few cars drift wide. Mark Elman, Joachim Bulting, both using some of the generous runoff on the outside of the first turn. But look at that third and fourth position for the W&S cars. That's a really handy start for the German team and their Caymans, although the Raptor Racing by Racelab car is now between them. So the second of the McLarens now running fourth place.
Really good start then from Ratikan, managing to fend off further into turn 1. It looked like Enrico's reactions were slightly better, but he was on the outside line. It wasn't the right place to be. And sensibly, I think he chose to slot in behind. Those two maybe slightly gapping the third-place battle as they round the left-hander and start climbing uphill towards this intricate final sector. Looks as though Mark Elman may have lost a position in the Ginetta further back. I noticed him running wide, heading through turn 3, actually trying to avoid, I think, the back of Ravi Ramid, who has had some contact, though. The rear bodywork of the BMW, the Century Motorsport car, is hanging a little bit loose. So already things are starting to get a little bit physical out on track. Everyone's still going, but a few battle scars already.
Yeah, Ravi Ramid, who's come up from Ginetta Racing in the GT Academy Championship. Very, very quick driver is Ravi Ramid. Charlie Robertson with him, but as you can see, that brand new BMW M4 GT4 Evo is already possibly in need of at least one spare part, but the car will continue on unabated. It is Josh Ratikan at the lead, Enrico Ferderer second place, Alan Gabay third, Charlie Hart in fourth, and Tim Hurrell, the first of the Pro-Am cars, running fifth overall. Tim, one of the great stories on this grid. He is paraplegic. He had a car accident at the age of 21, was always a car enthusiast. He started his racing career many years after the fact, initially in America, has moved over to Germany seeking some more competition, racing a specially adapted car by W&S Motorsport partners, Paravan, and a really great story, and he is so rapid as well. A Pro-Am lineup, yes, but Tim Hurrell does not hang around in the slightest.
Maximilian Hewitt's not hanging around either, trying to get past Tim there, who we were just talking about in the Porsche, just misses the apex slightly as they drop downhill there through turn 6. And the Aston Martin looking pretty racy at this point in the race. Ratican out in front, 0.6 of a second his advantage at the end of lap 1, but looked to be asserting that authority. He's clearly going for it in the early stages, but will maybe Enrico Federer have the long game in mind, maybe managing those tyres to try and make a bit of an attack in the latter stages. We're coming towards the conclusion of the second lap though, and some good battles developing, including actually the one for third place as well. Charlie Hart will not be happy to have fallen behind Alan Gabay and will want to try and get that place back as quickly as possible. They round the final turn, head down the main straight, and Maximilian Hewitt here, I think, lining up for a move.
Yeah, Hewitt in the slipstream. But actually not quite staying on the back of the Porsche there. I think Harel was slightly swerving there to try and break the slip a little bit. Charlie Hart then in 4th position, all over the back of Alain Gabay. Of course, as you said, Charlie, a fresh graduate from Ginetta Junior Racing, so he's gone up from a car that was capped at 100 mile an hour to something quite a bit faster. Big development for him in his first ever GT4 race. There you see the Aston as well, the racing spirit of Le Mans car. That, of course, as we alluded to, being driven by Max Hewitt in this race. The American moving up from the Toyota GR single make series over there. Was a very, very prolific karter. Took a few years off of racing. Is now making his debut in European car racing with us this weekend. So it looks like this battle for third place between Gabay and Hart is the real point of interest here, and certainly Charlie Hart is making his intentions known. Teenage exuberance I'm seeing in the body language of that car.
Well, he exhibited quite a lot of really clever racecraft, I thought, in the Ginetta Juniors last year. I was lucky enough to be able to follow most of that season in 2024, and he really did impress me. So he knows how to make an overtake, how to place the car. Overtaking a bit more of a challenge maybe in GT4 racing than it is Juniors, but he's certainly giving it a good go and wants to get on with it because he knows he's got the pace of Ratican and Federer out in front. But right now, that pace is being impeded very much by Alain Gabay, who is defending well in third place. Across the line they go, 1.6 seconds now the gap between the top two, but Charlie Hart, I reckon, was closer to the rear of the Porsche this time around than he was a lap earlier. By the end of the straight though, he's not, so the Porsches, Adam, seem to be performing well in a straight line, whereas the McLaren, and in this case the Aston Martin, maybe have the edge elsewhere.
Yes, typically the cars that are slightly smaller in frame towards the end of the straight have a few mile an hour. Typically the McLaren isn't so great out of slow corners, but towards the end of the straight it will be quicker, of course, because it cuts through the air better than, say, a Mercedes or a Toyota Supra or the Aston Martin, these kind of slightly more larger, cumbersome frames. Charlie Hart, though, really is fun to watch. I've seen him before in Ginetta Juniors as well. Always good for an ambitious move or two here or there, and we're looking forward to seeing his progress. And I think for him at the moment, he wants to get by and into third as soon as possible, because with 23 minutes still on the clock, there's still a chance that he can go and chase down Enrico Federer.
Well, he's flashing the lights at Alain Gabay now, which of course means Alan is guaranteed to put the indicator on and move out of the way. That's how this generally works. I think not. Charlie Hart is going to have to open this door himself. Is there a lunge up the inside? No, not quite close enough. And actually, Gabay sort of defended that into the uphill chicane. Uses a lot of curb in the Porsche, as indeed behind does Maximilian Hewitt, who similarly is finding that the Porsche Cayman is not an easy car to overtake. Through the final two turns they come now. This is about as close as Charlie was a lap ago going on to the main straight. By the end of it, he wasn't within striking range. What will happen this time around at the completion of lap number 4? They both run right to the edge of the road. And again, Gabay just weaving around, tries to break the slipstream, but that gap that was less than a car's length going onto the straight at the line is closer to 3.
Yeah, no, I see your point. That Porsche does look very strong. The Aston having a speculative look to the inside there from Maximilian Hewitt. Really interesting to talk to him earlier on in the day. He and Baudouin de two drivers with very interesting backgrounds, very different backgrounds as well. We'll talk about them a bit more perhaps in the Enduro as a pairing, but for now difficult to know where to look, especially if you're GTWS Motorsport, because in frame is two of your cars, both of which are under huge pressure.
I wonder whether Charlie is thinking of a move here down at the bottom of the hill. Again, flashing the lights at Gabai. It's clear that Charlie's not really going to be able to make this move into turn one, so he may have to get inventive either down here or perhaps into the uphill chicane at the end of the lap. They seem to be the two areas at which the McLaren is strong. He's latched onto the back of the Porsche as they head down towards turn 7, and behind it's almost as tight between Tim Horrell and Maximilian Hewitt. Round the downhill right-hander, now we head towards the chicane. Is Charlie Hart going to think about it? No, again, Gabai has the middle of the road covered, and it doesn't really seem to hurt his exit speed. He takes a tighter line through the right-hand element of the chicane than Charlie does, but it doesn't seem to slow him down.
Max Hewitt there using a bit too much curb at Gancho, getting a bit loose as Charlie Hart now trying to go around the outside at the Parabolica Ayrton Senna. That is going to be a seismic commitment if he can make it work. But then, of course, as they go down the straight, nearly making contact there, going onto the straight, but surely on the straight. Now the Porsche is going to disappear up the road again by just a car length or two, but that's critical, of course, because the biggest overtaking point of the lap is right there at turn 1, and it seems as though Charlie Hart isn't quite able to utilise it.
That was fabulous racing, though. Inches between the right front corner of Charlie Hart's McLaren and the left rear of Alan Gabai's Porsche. Charlie is, I think, sizing up another move into turn 3, but Gabai had it covered. And, of course, as Alan is having to defend more and more vigorously, so it brings Tim Horrell and Maximilian Hewitt onto their tails. So what was initially two-way fights is now becoming one big four-way scrap for the lower podium places.
So it is becoming a four-way, certainly. I think Joachim Bulting may have had some issues earlier on in the race, because he's dropped down to the very rear of the field. I don't think he's crossed the line. I think he is in the pits. I did hear that someone was pit bound, so Joachim Bulting having issues in his AM class car. Reminder that in the Pro-Am class, your leader is Tim Horrell in 5th overall. Ravi Ramyed an invitational entry in that BMW M4. He's the only invitational entry there. And it is, I believe, Mikael Sander leading the way in the 111 car within Cayman Trophy. Former GTWinterSeries champion, Mikael Sander. So we shouldn't be surprised that he is strong, as he so often is in GEDLICH Racing competition. Here comes Charlie Hart again. Thankfully, for those that are faint of heart, not quite to the outside of Alan Gabai this time around. And again, we're going to see that gap extend slightly. And I think, again, the Porsche seemingly with the ever so slight legs over the Aston Martin as well. So these WNS cars getting a little bit of a reprieve into the most critical part of the lap. Both Charlie Hart and Max Hewitt are really going to have to work to do this. And for both drivers, for Hart and Hewitt, it's their first race in a GT4 car. So they've really been thrown into quite a complex situation in their first taste of this style of racing.
That's a very good point, but what they both know is how to race, and I think we're seeing that now. Some very respectful stuff from Charlie Hart. We're on board here with Alan Gabai. We're in 3rd position, exiting the left-hander up at turn 4, through the kink behind the pits, and into the braking zone at 6, where I don't think Charlie Hart is close enough still to throw it up the inside. I don't know whether Hewitt maybe made a mistake at the start of this lap, because he's suddenly not really in shot with these three. So the Aston Martin driver in 6th position drifting away slightly. Alan Gabai there drifting away from the apex rather. Has that given a chance for Charlie Hart, who, as I said, is going to have to get inventive here. If he wants to make this pass, he will have to do it somewhere that Alan Gabai is not really expecting it. But Charlie has tried at most corners now to get an overlap, and still to no avail.
Yeah, it's been a very compelling race so far, hasn't it, for Charlie Hart? It's one of attempts, one of bids for a position, but so far the podium hasn't gone his way. Wouldn't he love to stand on a podium in his first GT4 race? That really is signalling your arrival in the best way possible. Inside left open there by Alan Gabai. He drifts wide. He gets a little bit unsettled on the curve as well. It's a drag race. The McLaren has a nose ahead. Is the Porsche going to get enough of an overlap to try and hold that 3rd place? I don't think so. Doesn't appear that Andy thinks so as well. well. They're side by side. Hart is later on the brakes, has the inside line so long as he gets it stopped for the apex, and he does. That is some textbook racing there from Charlie Hart. Really, the first time Alan Gabay has put a foot wrong, and Charlie takes advantage.
But that is what you've got to do. Oh, now don't run wide, Charlie, and give the play straight back. Just about hooks up the late apex. But that's what you've got to do. If you've got a car that isn't as quick as the car in front of you down the straights, and you can't just throw it up the inside into the braking zones, force a mistake. The first mistake that Gabay made, and it was costly, and Charlie Hart went through. Now Charlie, of course, needs to get his head down and get out of there, because as hard as it is to pass a car that has a few extra mile an hour than you in a straight line, it's going to be just as difficult to get away from it. So Gabay, for now, continuing to apply the pressure as they drop down through turn 6. Charlie just needs to get his head down, almost ignore the rear view mirror, and just focus on hitting his marks, getting into a rhythm. The leaders, I'm afraid, might be a bit too far away now with only about half the race to go, but at least he can solidify third place, and it's been a well-earned third place at that.
So to give you some background, if you're new to Alan Gabay, if you want to get an impression of who Charlie Hart has just managed to get past, a race podium finisher in the GT4 European Series and ADAC GT4 Germany. In 2023, raced and won in the GTC race category, which is effectively a step below GT4 Germany over in that part of the world. And the Porsche Sports Cup Deutschland, a very decorated driver in these Porsche Cayman GT4s, and Charlie Hart managing to get past there. One thing I did want to circle back to, you're talking about Max Hewitt making an error. I wonder if it's more that he's overheated his rear tyres, because earlier on when he was right on the back of Tim Hurrell, he was getting very sideways out of some of the slower corners, like turn 3, the Lamy corner. So I just think maybe those rears are starting to protest against some of the more exuberant driving at the wheel of the 39 Racing Spirit of Le Mans entry, the United for Racing by Racing Spirit of Le Mans, which is a mouthful.
Yes, contender for longest team name of the season, and we're only in race 1 of the season, but yeah, we'll see whether or not he can regroup and close back in on that group. I would argue, though, that Ravi Ramid is maybe starting to make an impression upon him. Yeah, fractionally quicker on the last lap, and in fact Ravi was one of 3 drivers to set a personal best lap on the most recent tour, the other 2 being the second place car of Enrico Federer, and perhaps unsurprisingly Charlie Hart in third place, because that was his first lap in clean air. Ratican, though, the leader, has just done a purple first sector, so fastest of anybody in the first part of the lap, perhaps responding to the fact that Enrico Federer didn't drop back by quite as much on that lap as he has been for the first 15 minutes.
Yes, I'm sure he's getting the information fed, Enrico Federer getting the information fed by Tim Neuser, who is one of the kind of guiding lights of that SR Motorsport team and has been one of a few members of that team that's a bit of a mentor to Enrico Federer, who we had last year in Cayman Trophy, moved into GT4 cars for the summer and is back to try and win the championship in the GT4 Winter Series in the Mercedes AMG. It's the exact combination that was so successful in German GT4 racing during the 2024 season. Of course, Josh Ratican, a driver that we saw win the GT4 European Series Silver Class with Tom Leben, who we saw here 12 months ago. Mackenzie Cresswell is sharing the car with Josh Ratican this year in the GT4 Winter Series, and that feels like a very good recipe. Tom Leben last year came out of the FIA Formula 3 Championship and was immediately on the money in GT4 Winter Series, winning races. And now Mackenzie Cresswell, coming out of a race-winning campaign in GB3, moving into GT4 with a familiar team, with Elite Motorsport, who he's raced and won with in the last couple of years in GB3, with someone like Josh Ratican at the wheel alongside. That's a very strong combination.
It's interesting to me, anyway, that there are more and more young single-seater stars these days who see GT4 as a viable option on their career path, rather than, as some would say, wasting their time, effort and money on trying to pursue a single-seater career. Move into GT racing. You can earn a living in GT racing as a young professional driver, and I think you have a bit more fun as well, to be honest. So more and more of them starting to do this, and yeah, Mackenzie Cresswell, really interested to see how he gets on over the course of 2025, and specifically, of course, throughout the Winter Series. But yeah, they are going to be a force to be reckoned with, that is for sure. Josh Ratican is in superb form this afternoon. He and indeed the rest of the top 4 drivers all set personal best laps last time around, but Ratican's was a new fastest lap of the race. That time around he does a 1:43.9, virtually matched really by Enrico Federer in second. Charlie Hart, now that he's in clean air, matching the leader. So this is what we expected really after qualifying. It's a shame in a way that Charlie had to spend the first half of the race stuck behind the Porsche of Alain Gabay, but now he's in clean air, he's showing us what he's capable of.
We ride on board then with the BMW M4 GT4 Evo there, being driven by Ravi Ramyid. I think this might be the first European appearance in racing conditions for the M4 GT4 Evo. It's not formally homologated until March, which is why it's now running as an invitational class car. Of course, only debuted at the start of 2023, so 2 years on. It is quite a mild evolution, but an evolution nonetheless. And for Charlie and Ravi, this is a full season campaign in GT4 Winter Series, looking to build upon an increase in form at the end of the British GT season. Of course, managed to get their best result right at the end, and will be looking to capitalise on, I think, the expectations. I think last year the results maybe didn't quite match what a lot of people were expecting in British GT, but Ravi, a very, very good bronze, and of course Charlie Robertson in his young career with Ginetta has raced all over the world and proven himself time and time again.
It's very difficult, though, let's be honest, to be finishing on the podium in British GT4 these days, because that GT4 category is so competitive. GT4 racing globally, I think, really is now starting to catch on. It caught on a while ago, but really starting to catch on now with big grids, lots of star drivers. As I said, lots of young single-seater drivers moving into GT4 as well, which no doubt has had something to do with that. It was an odd year in a way for Ravi last year, because you're right, it was the last few rounds of British GT where he seemed to find form. Right after that enormous shunt that he had at Spa when he lost it going up through Eau Rouge and Radion and wrote off the car pretty much, and I think knocked himself about a bit, but came out of that. Some drivers would have lost confidence. He clearly gained confidence and gained some form at the latter stages of the season, and he'll be looking to continue that into 2025. A really talented driver, Ravi. He's not been racing for that long at all, and I think is definitely going to be one to watch over the course of the next year or so.
Some interesting battles further back in the field, this being one of them. Peter Lobeck at the wheel of the rather stealthy Plus Line Racing team entry. He is being joined in that car by Peter Terting, the former factory Audi and Seat driver in the DTM and the World Touring Car Championship. A very strong co-driver there for Peter come at the later races, but it's Mikael Sander, the leader in Cayman Trophy, that he is behind at the moment. So here's a bit of a comparison then between the 3.8 litre Cayman Trophy car, the slightly sub GT4 spec machine, versus the full fat GT4 car. You can see the slightly wider stance, the slightly more aggressive bodywork and braking from Peter Lobeck versus Mikael Sander there, who looked like he might have been stamping the brake pedal a bit there on a corner exit. But that's an interesting battle, and they're not too far behind them, as well as Mark Ellman in the other Pro-Am class car, running third in Pro-Am, the Ginetta G56. There's your second place car, Enrico Federer, some 10 seconds now off Josh Ratican, who is well clear of the field.
That was a slow lap for Federer. It was a 47.2. He dropped about 3.5 seconds that lap. I thought this gap had come down significantly, and the lead gap had grown significantly in a relatively short space of time. So not all of that time was lost on the previous lap, but certainly a bit of it. Now, does that mean he's running into an issue, or is he just making a few little mistakes? This will incentivise Charlie Hart, though, who at the beginning of this 13th lap of the race was exactly 3 seconds behind the Mercedes in the first sector, takes another 9/10 out of him. So something strange is going on with that SR Motorsport by Schnitzelalm Mercedes, and it could be that Charlie Hart is the one to benefit.
One of the slowest first sectors of anybody out there for Enrico Federer. That does not match the level of performance we can usually see from him. Looks like the lights are out as well. I think they were on earlier on. I don't know whether maybe there's some early stage electrical issues, something like that, but something is clearly amiss with Enrico Federer's car. The gap that was 3 seconds at the start of the lap, well, that's less than a second as they head through the Gancho chicane. Now, I suspect that if the car is at least going to stay at this level of speed, they'll try and keep it out there to score points, since they are a full season entrant. But Enrico Federer here is definitely struggling, and coming onto the straight, I wouldn't be surprised if Charlie Hart has second place before long.
I think you may well be right. He's got a slipstream, and he's clearly got more power at his disposal. Look at that. The Mercedes-AMG GT4 has nothing in comparison to the McLaren, which breezes by on the inside line. Charlie Hart, then, who spent the first half of this race off the podium, is now into second position, a little bit fortuitously, yes, because there's clearly an issue with Federer's Mercedes-AMG, but Charlie Hart will gladly take that second position. I'm intrigued as to what the problem may be. Electrics does seem a possibility. If the electrics are playing up, of course, that can have an effect not only on things like the lights, the rear lights indeed have now gone off as well, but also maybe the power of the car, things like traction control, ABS might be playing up as well. It doesn't look like he's losing time in one particular part of the circuit, it's just around the whole lap. So, yeah, the next 6.5 minutes are now more of a case of seeing whether he can hang on to third place or not, because on that previous lap, he did a 43.9, actually not that slow, and still quicker than what the cars behind are doing. So, provided the situation doesn't worsen, third place should still be okay, but these are going to feel like a very long 6 minutes.
I think we may have also had a mistake towards the back of the field for the Monteros Competición car, which has dropped down a position. So unfortunately, I think we have some issues there for Enrique Oliveira. Was right up there and actually fighting quite close with Thilo Gus earlier on. Thilo actually is now right on the back of Willi Kühne in a battle for 11th overall. And that's the thing about this racing. There is, yes, 5 classes out there on the circuit, but if someone's ahead of you, you want to get past. It's quite simple, really. Look at Joshua Rattigan. Again, fastest lap of the race. We are 25 minutes in. Those tyres have been through something already, and he has been clearly not just driving off at full speed, he's been managing those tyres as well.
Yeah, most other drivers are around half a second away from their optimal pace, whereas Josh Rattigan just keeps on getting quicker and quicker and quicker. And this is ominous for the rest of them, isn't it, moving forward into the rest of the weekend, the rest of the season. He's going to be a tough man to beat, but it's not all about what Josh can do, of course. We'll have to wait and see what sort of pace Mackenzie Creswell has a little bit later on in the weekend. This is a battle that looks like it's starting to bubble away quite nicely. It is the fight for, I believe, 4th position, this, isn't it? You've got Alan Gabay with Tim Horrell not far behind in his Porsche, and Maximilian Hewitt, the Aston Martin, which faded about a third of the way into the race, now starting to come back into it. So, interesting, isn't it, Adam, that some drivers are getting quicker as the race goes on, some getting slower, and others seem to be having a bit of a roller coaster ride of it, but now appear to be peaking in the final 5 minutes.
And of course, the Schnitzelhelm, or the SR Motorsport by Schnitzelhelm car, is being reeled in by this trio as well. So there's every chance that they could end up trying to capitalise on the woes of Enrico Federer and SR Motorsport before the end of the race too. So this could be, ultimately, within the next 4 minutes, it could be a 4-way battle for the last podium position. Not that I think Federer has a fully sharpened weapon to fight with.
No, that's very true, but he won't want to fall into their clutches, because you're quite right. That's likely to not just be 1 place lost, but maybe 2 or 3. Don't forget that Alan Gabay still leads in Pro-Am, so even if he loses a position to Tim Horrell, and indeed Maximilian Hewitt, that won't affect that position. Second place in Pro-Am is the 69 car. Now that is the Peter Lobeck car. It was being warned a few laps ago, Adam, about exceeding track limits. He did not heed that warning, so 5 seconds now added to his time, and he was only 6 seconds clear of Mark Elman in the SVG Motorsport Ginetta. So if Mark gets his foot down, he could inherit second place in class.
Yes, we'll see if that proves to work out in Elman's favour. He would have to find some more speed there, lap on lap, over the course of the next 3 minutes. He has been dropping back over the last several minutes of the race. At the front, though, it's a bit of a McLaren advert, really. McLaren Arturas 1 and 2, Elite Motorsport and Rafa Racing by Racelab at the front of the order. Those, of course, are pro entries, as is the SR Motorsport by Schnitzelhelm car in third. third in the hands of Enrico Ferderer, who is now slightly closer to the competitive pace, but he's still a good second a lap off those behind him. They might run out of time to reel him in, especially if they start fighting each other. And certainly Max Hewitt has been pursuing his countryman Tim Hurrell all race long, from very differing racing backgrounds, those two. Formula Regional Americas and Toyota GR1 Make Racing for Hewitt, and Tim has pretty much always been on the GT racing path, and he is doing absolutely fabulously there, 5th overall, and of course, as it stands, well on the way to a Pro-Am class win in this first race of the season.
Hewitt is definitely closer to Hurrell now, though, than he has been for a while, but of course, he was this close early on and couldn't find a way through. We've seen how strong the Porsches are in a straight line, this part of the circuit in particular, past the pits. Through they go on to what will be their penultimate lap of the race. I think a lap and a half left probably for Josh Ratican, who is 15 seconds now clear of Charlie Hart out at the front of the field. Hewitt not quite close enough there to lunge to the inside into turn one, but he will take some confidence here from the fact that he has closed in on Hurrell pretty rapidly over the last 5 minutes. And maybe if Tim is starting to run out of tyres, that could present an opportunity for the Aston Martin driver to make his move. What of Enrico Ferderer, by the way? Well, he was 1.3 seconds slower than Alan Gabay and Tim Hurrell on the previous lap. I think you're right. I think they will just run out of time, but the gap certainly continues to close.
Yeah, it's certainly not the way Ferderer would like to spend the second half of this race, slowly losing time, wondering if he's even going to get the chance to stand on the podium, but it looks like it's going to work. Of course, Enrico Ferderer, a champion, as we've alluded to, in Germany. Jamo Hartling, his co-driver, last year's GTWinterSeries champion, along with Kenneth Heyer. So two drivers that we expect to be up there at the sharp end all season long. They would expect nothing less than a podium from their first outing of the season. Meanwhile, Josh Ratican will be starting his final lap this time by, there is the number 77 car. You can see him there kind of jostling the car under brakes. This car has the highest rake of any in terms of the minimum ride heights that they have to adhere to in the BOP, some 20 millimeters difference between the front and rear. So you can imagine it does turn in well, but sometimes under braking, that does mean you have to perform a negotiation.
You could see that, though, into turn two there, the nose of the car diving down, and it rotated beautifully into the apex. That looks like a car that, you're right, is probably a little bit edgy to drive, but clearly Josh Ratican is well attuned to that and has put in a pretty dominant performance. Yes, Enrico Ferderer had some issues. Yes, Charlie Hart was stuck in a bit of traffic for the first half of the race, but you can't take anything away from Ratican. He has consistently been the fastest man on track and is now less than half a lap away from beginning the GT Winter Series on the top step of the podium.
The quality of his driving is plain to see. As we've alluded to, silver champion, which is the highest class of the GT4 European Series, so effectively the overall champions. The best team of all was Elite Motorsport in a lineup featuring this man, Josh Ratican, and he's come into the GT4 Winter Series, and it appears he has lost none of his form. I don't believe he'll have ever seen this Estoril circuit before. I don't think he'll have ever stood on the top step of the podium before, but that is the fate that awaits him. Out of the Parabolica, Ayrton Senna, and our first winner of the season is Joshua Ratican, Elite Motorsport. Remember that statistic I mentioned earlier on? Last year's inaugural winner became the first ever GT4 Winter Series champion. Let's see if history repeats. Charlie Hart across the line in second position. In third place, it should be Enrico Ferderer. It will just about be Enrico Ferderer, staying on the circuit, making sure they get those points for third position, and he will be happy that he managed to find some of that pace again after the car's early drop from form. Gabay, Hurrell, Hewitt round out our top half dozen ahead of Ravi Ramid in the Invitational Evo Spec M4 GT4, and here is some Cayman warfare. The Pro-Am entered car of Peter Lorbeck running in 9th overall, second in Pro-Am, set to be scored by the number 69 car as well, but he was wants 8th place. He's not quite going to get there, though. Mikael Sander looks like he has the measure of him. Sander will take the Cayman Trophy victory for the 3.8 litre Caymans. He crosses the line in 8th place. He has been kept very busy in that one by Peter Lorbeck. The top 10 and the Pro-Am podium will be rounded out by Mark Ellman there in SVG Motorsport's first ever appearance in international GT competition. Great to have them with us this year. Joachim Bolting in 11th place, crossing the line. He was in the pits at one point, we understand, so he recovered nicely. Willy Kuna crossed the line in 12th, just ahead of Thilo Goss. They had a bit of a close battle there, unseen by the cameras, in 12th and 13th position, and Thilo becomes the first ever winner in the club class for out of homologation GT4 cars. Ahead of that car, the last across the line, Monteros Competición with their BMW M4 GT4 F82, which is a fresh purchase for the team. A brand new car to them, but certainly not a brand new car, generally speaking. And our first race of the weekend is now in the books. Elite Motorsport with the first win of the season. Joshua Ratigan showing his form, showing what he is capable of once again at the sharp end of the order. Quite the GT4 specialist Ratigan is developing into. And I suspect it won't be too long before we see him in much faster machinery as well. There is the Elite Motorsport McLaren. Of course, some pleasing circularity for Elite Motorsport. They won the final GT4 Winter Series race of 2024, and they win the first GT4 Winter Series race of 2025. So that has gone about as well for them as they could have hoped. Great to have the team back, of course, going into what might be their biggest season yet with the expansion of the GB3 calendar. They're a prominent fixture in that series, of course, and they're moving into GT3 racing for the first time with a Ferrari 296, and they've kicked off the year just about as well as they could. Of course, worth acknowledging as well the Pro-Am win going to Tim Harrell. Great driving from him in the WNS Motorsport car. We knew he would be fast, and certainly I think some smart money will be being placed on that car for the Pro-Am honours going forward this weekend. Based on his performance, Nico Grundel will be taking the start of the second sprint race for that team, and he will have quite the act to follow. Joshua Ratigan celebrating win number 1 of the campaign in the GT4 Winter Series. The team meeting him there. Kenzie Cresswell congratulating his teammate. Josh has laid his cards down and said, beat that. And we'll see whether that's possible for the young Brit, the number 77 Elite Motorsport car. We should be hearing from him shortly, of course, with Izzy down there in the pits. And of course, we will bring you the podium ceremony from that race as well. The Circuito Estoril has already provided some thrilling action in this race. Plenty of wheel-to-wheel stuff. And for Charlie Hart, I think he will be delighted with second place as well. I'm sure there's going to be a wry smile on his face as he steps up to the podium later on. A sign of good things to come for the Rafa Racing by Race Lab squad. And indeed, the young Brit making that step forth into GT3 machinery. Meanwhile, down in the pit lane, we can get some reaction to the first race of the GT4 Winter Series season.
Yes, I am with our race 1 winner, first winner of the season. Josh, I'm going to be honest, we didn't really see all that much of your race because you kind of flew off into the lead. So you can talk me through it yourself.
I mean, yeah, like I said, obviously on the grid, just keep cool like we did in GT4. Obviously the summer series, just keep my cool, and that's what I do best. I just don't worry about anyone behind me.
And I mean, what a way to announce yourself in the Winter Series paddock. We've already said, of course, you are the reigning GT4 European Series champion, but what a way to come into this paddock. And now Estoril, how was that to drive in such a beautiful circuit, such beautiful conditions, and looking forward to tomorrow as well?
Yeah, I'm obviously definitely looking forward to tomorrow. Obviously, I couldn't have done it without these guys being behind you. Obviously, Elite Motorsport, McLaren themselves, obviously, it's their doing that I've done so well. Yeah, obviously, couldn't have done it better.
And I mean, the commentator said just now, Adam Weller said to us that Elite actually won the last race of last season, and now they've won the first race of this season. So really, it is a credit to the team behind you, isn't it?
Yeah, like I say, we couldn't do it without them. Best team, obviously, I've ever been with, and obviously couldn't be more thankful for them.
All right, well, another race tomorrow for you. Of course, you'll hand over to Mackenzie for race 2. So are we going to see another win from you guys?
Don't see why not. He's obviously on pace, like I say. It's his first time in the GT4 2 days ago on Thursday, and he was straight on pace, 2 attempts off me, if that. So I don't see why not. Obviously, it's raining tomorrow, so it's going to be a little bit tricky for the both of us. I haven't driven this in a long time in the wet. He never has driven it in the wet. Don't see why not. He's got the talent, he's got the pace. Got my fingers crossed for him. All
right, good stuff. Congratulations. We'll let you go up to the podium and enjoy it. All right, there is our race 1 winner, Josh Rattican. We will go back up to Adam quickly, and I'm going to see if I can find someone else from our race.
Good stuff, Izzy. You can always trust you to find someone and place the microphone in front of them for some insights. Thank you very much. And great to hear from Josh, who certainly seems, shall we say, unsurprised by his result there. I think he knew from pole position that he could get it done, and he absolutely succeeded in that task. He and Elite Motorsport kicking off the year in the best way possible. And a McLaren 1-2 as well, which will please some of the customer racing crew. Meanwhile, Izzy, as promised, has found someone else to chat to down there in the pits.
I have indeed managed to find another driver. Charlie Hart joins me now. Charlie, where to start with your race, first of all? Because, I mean, you were putting the pressure on from the beginning on the driver ahead of you. Sort of saw you make a couple of half moves, just seeing where you might make the move, and then once you're past, you're absolutely flying.
Yeah, obviously, I just missed just the start a little, dropped down to P5, got into 4th dead quick. Yeah, and it was quite tough to get past the Porsche, you know. I was just trying to fake move him, force him into a bit of a mistake, but managed to find a little gap and squeeze through, and yeah, just flew from there and managed to pick up P2, so yeah, I'm really happy.
Yeah, from there, I mean, when you saw another car kind of, you're getting closer to the P2 ahead of you, maybe had a slight issue in the Mercedes, Enrico Federer, but when you saw that car kind of getting closer and closer, you thought, oh, I could get another position here.
Yeah, no, it just fired me up that little bit more. Pace felt good, got past him, and then was just pushing for a fast lap and consistent pace all the way through for the data and stuff, so yeah, really good.
Well, you've got pace, as you just said, and another race tomorrow, of course, so you must be feeling confident going into that. Worth saying, I know the guys said it in commentary, your first race in GT4s. Pretty good way to start, eh?
Yeah, no, I'm really happy for the team. A lot of work's gone into it to turn everything round, and yeah, just really pleased with my driving and the performance.
All right, well, we'll let you get off to the podium. Enjoy it, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you very much. There we go. We are done here down in Parc Fermé, but they will go up to the podium, and we will get the highlights of that amazing race.
Okay, well, we're going to look at the moments that thrilled us in just a moment here on the broadcast. The GT4 Winter Series, as it did in 2024, kicking off 2025 in the GEDLICH Racing paddock. And let's take a look now at the highlights of that race. As Charlie Hart alluded to, it wasn't the best of starts from him, dropping down to 5th place from the second row of the grid. It was a good start from Enrico Federer on the outside of the front row in the number 11 SR Mercedes, but it would be Josh Rattigan that went into an early lead. It would prove to be a definitive lead as well. Some interesting jostling further back as we saw there the number 69 plus line car of Peter Lorbeck getting into the rear of Ravi Ramyid on the first lap. Ramyid would ultimately have a fairly quiet race from that point in the all-new M4 GT4 Evo, brand new chassis for the team for this season. Meanwhile, the number 30, number 39 cars, Tim Hurrell and Max Hewitt, the American pair, having a good race further back in the field. Charlie Hart was sat just outside the podium positions in 4th place on the back of Alan Gabay of W&S Motorsport, but it wouldn't be long before he found his way through. It was a good 10 minutes, though, of Alan Gabay working very hard to keep Charlie Hart at bay. Hart Hart would get a good run at one point out of Gancho and indeed through turn 12 at the S's. And would almost find a way around the outside improbably as the battle intensified. Almost 4 cars fighting for the final podium position as we got towards the final third of the race. But soon an opportunity would come knocking for Charlie Hart, and he only needed one to really find his way through. He didn't need to be given a second chance, let's put it that way. You can see them there using the limits, using the extremes of the circuit to try and find the pace. And there was Charlie Hart through into third position. He managed to take advantage of a slight error from Alan Gabay going through the final corner, and through into third place he was, and fairly soon he was building a gap over both W&S Motorsport Porsches. It looked for a while as though Tim Hurrell might find a way past Alan Gabay, or at least challenge him for the position, but eventually the two W&S cars ended up holding strong, and of course Tim Hurrell would win the Pro-Am class in this first race of the season. Max Hewitt, after dropping off the pace a little bit with what looked to be some tyre deg, he would start to challenge Tim again for 5th overall, but ultimately the Aston would stay behind the Porsche. And meanwhile, much to everyone's almost surprise because he was so far ahead and we saw so little of him, Joshua Rattican crossed the line to win. Forgotten perhaps a little bit at the front, 15 seconds clear and dominating the first GT4 Winter Series race of the year, handing the baton tomorrow to Mackenzie Cresswell, who certainly has quite the act to follow. Exciting racing then from the GT4 Winter Series. 3 teams in the top 3, Elite, Rafa Racing by Racelab and SR Motorsport, your top 3. Of course, Elite, last year's runners-up in the championship. SR Motorsport, or rather, Elite Motorsport were 3rd in last year's championship. SR Motorsport, last year's vice-champions in the GT4 Winter Series. Last year's champions for SETI Motorsport, of course, with their Aston Martin. So we know Aston Martins can be strong here in the GT4 Winter Series. We've seen that happen before. And of course, we did have an Aston winning in the club class in 13th overall. Here's a look at the results then. Joshua Rattican winning by 15 seconds over Charlie Hart. Enrico Ferderer, 3rd position. Alan Gabay in 4th. Tim Hurrell in 5th place. 6th position, Max Hewitt. Ravi Ramyed in the Invitational class car in 7th. Of course, Tim Hurrell winning in Pro-Am. Mikael Sander, 8th overall and winning in Cayman Trophy ahead of Peter Lobeck. Those two were having a bit of a dice towards the end, of course. Mark Ellman rounding out the overall top 10 and the podium in Pro-Am. Joachim Bulting in 11th place for the Plus Line Racing team. He wins in the Am class. Willi Kuhne in 12th place and Thilo Goss, as we alluded to, winning in the club class in the BWT Muka Motorsport car. That car branded in the rather wonderful business of Thilo Goss. He is a music technician by trade, and Enrique Oliveira finishing 2nd in club and 14th overall. So a good start to GT4s. Of course, we've got plenty more action to come here today. The Prototype Winter Series will be next out on the circuit. The 2nd generation LMP3 cars with what could be their final foray, shall we say, into the Prototype Winter Series, at least as the front-running cars. Meanwhile, though, let's focus back in on the GT4s and Andy McEwen, who is going to present us with our first podium of the year.
Thank you very much, Adam. Yes, we are ready to go with our first podium of the GT4 Winter Series for 2025. We've got 5 classes to get through, so we'll rattle through these as quickly as we can. Beginning with the club class, and we will welcome first of all our 2nd place finisher in the club category, Enrique Mora Oliveira. In the top step of the podium, though, for the club category for BWT Muka Motorsport was Thilo Goss. Up onto the podium they will go. Their trophies then are to be presented. We've got a few representatives here to do the honours. First of all, the second place trophies for all of our classes being handed over by Mario Montero from Quintas das Arcas, and our first place trophies by Marco Soana from Pirelli. They will pose now for the photos. A big crowd gathered down below to enjoy the moment as well. The photographers getting all the best angles. Onto the top step of the podium they will go. And I'm sure tomorrow we will see the champagne flying, but for now, they know that only half the job has been done. So the club class drivers then will make their way off the podium. We now move on to the Cayman Trophy. 2 more drivers to welcome onto the podium. Both of them, of course, running for SR Motorsport. In second place in the Cayman Trophy, Willy Kerner. Onto the second step he will go, but onto the top step will go our first Cayman Trophy winner of the season, Mikael Sander. It's a very bright podium as the SR Motorsport with Schnitzelalm drivers celebrate for the photographers. The trophies, of course, will be presented again for our top 2 drivers. And they're doing the photos first this time, just to keep us on our toes. So out will come the trophies now. Mario with the second place trophy, and again, Bruno Vieira from Pirelli with the race winner's trophy for Michael Sander after a well-managed race for the 2 SR Motorsport drivers. Congratulations to both of our Cayman Trophy class podium finishers. Next on to the AM class. There was only one entrant, but it was a strong drive nonetheless for the Plus Line Racing teams. Joachim Bolting. Out comes Joachim onto the top of the podium. And Joachim had a pretty quiet race in the end, which probably is something he will be quite happy about for this first round of the season. The trophy in his hand, and Joachim Bolting will celebrate to the crowd down below. That's more like it, guys. And poses for the photographs as well. Congratulations, Joachim, on a class winner. We need some photos with you, actually, if you want to just wander back up again. So just the one driver to celebrate on the podium for the AM category, Joachim Bolting for Plus Line Racing Team. Congratulations once again to Joachim. We now move on to the Pro-Am category then. In third position for SVG Motorsport, Mark Ellman. Well done, Mark. A solid debut in the GT4 Winter Series for him. We do not have, I'm afraid, our second place finisher, Peter Lobeck, but he, I'm sure, will be celebrating with the team. Celebrating with us all, though, here on the podium is what I'm sure is going to be a popular winner of the Pro-Am category, Tim Harrell. Congratulations, Tim. A really, really well-managed victory in the class, and the WNS Motorsport team here to celebrate with him as well. And Tim had to handle a lot of pressure there in the latter stages of the race in particular, and he will now stand atop the top step of the podium. The trophies can be taken out. Peter Lobeck's trophy, I'm sure, will be delivered to him in the garages a little bit later on, but Mark Ellman and Tim Harrell get a really, really nice response from the crowd down below the podium. Rightly so, they put on a really, really good show for us in the Pro-Am category. They pose for the photographs, and they'll be hoping that this is their first of many visits onto the podium in the GT4 Winter Series. Congratulations once again then to our Pro-Am class of drivers in the GT4 Winter Series. So in a moment or two, we will get our top 3 drivers from the Pro class, our top 3 drivers overall in what was an enthralling first race of the season in the GT4 Winter Series. We've already heard from 2 of them. I might, in a moment, try and have a quick chat with Enrico Ferderer as well to see what the issue was in the latter stages of that race. But we need to get them onto the podium first. I think we are ready to go then with our Pro and overall top 3 finishers. Third position for SR Motorsports, Enrico Ferderer. Congratulations, Enrico. Understandably, not quite as happy as he would have been had he managed to finish on the second step, but it was a solid result nonetheless. In second position, a hard-charging second place for Charlie Hart. Well done, Charlie.
looks remarkably calm about the situation, had arguably the most exciting race, really, of our top 3 drivers. But it was, in the end, a dominant performance for our race winner for Elite Motorsport, Josh Rattigan, who gets a really big cheer from the crowd down below. Josh climbs onto the top step of the podium. The trophies will be handed out. We welcome back Mario Montero and Bruno Vieira, and also Marco Suana to do the honours. And they will pose for the photographs. The cameras will be clicking away down below as we get our final podium celebrations for the GT4 Winter Series underway. I am going to try and have a really quick word with Enrico Federer, if that's okay as well. We can let the top 2 go, but Enrique, just wanted to very quickly have a chat with you because we want to know what the issue was there at the end.
Yeah, so until the half of the race, the car was really fast. We were in 2nd position. And after that, we have a technical issue, and we don't know yet, but we will find out.
Well, really unfortunate, but thank you for having a chat. Enrico Federer then 3rd position, 2nd place Charlie Hart. The win, of course, went the way of Josh Rattigan. And with that, we can move on now to our first prototype Winter Series action of the weekend.
The first prototype Winter Series race of the weekend. We have got a very, well, we've got enough time to have a little bit of a chat. 3 minutes just gone up, so I'm going to dive in and have a chat quickly. Of course, they've got 2 races coming up this weekend, 50 minutes plus 1 lap on each race, so equal distance for the races. We have got our reigning champion back on the grid, Danny Sufi, in the #1 car, of course. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Getting to have the #1 car. Danny Sufi, welcome back to the Prototype Winter Series grid. You're sporting the #1 on your car, of course, the reigning champion. So how are you feeling ahead of this first race?
I'm stoked. I'm ready to drive.
And the Estoril circuit, of course, you've raced here before. How has it been in testing this week, and how are you feeling? Are you going to be able to keep the number 20 behind you?
No, it's been good. I'm really excited to be back here. We really enjoyed this championship last year, and so to be back and just familiar tracks, keep refining what we've been working on, go for the races, just, clean start, try and stay ahead, and then carry it to the end.
And a long way to go in this season, but obvious question that I have to ask you is, can you do the double? Can you win back-to-back championships?
I'm going to try for sure.
All right, well, we'll wish you the best of luck, and we'll move on up the grid, give you a quick look. Of course, on P2, we've got the number 20 of Philip Lindberg, the high-class racing team, joining us on the grid this year. I'll see if I can just dive in quickly with Philip. Philip, welcome to the Prototype Winter Series grid. How are you feeling ahead of the first race? Of course, beautiful clear skies and beautiful clear track ahead of you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward for a great race, and just to keep improving myself, and great to be here in the Winter Series and my debut here in LMP3. So looking forward.
And you've done TCR, I believe, but how's an LMP3 to drive?
Way different, way different.
All right.
Real race car.
Wish you best of luck. All right, we're going to keep walking as the cars get fired up, and actually we're going to head off the grid quickly before we get thrown off.
Here we are then, the first Prototype Winter Series race begins with the champ on pole position. Danny Soufi in his Ligier from Conrad Motorsport is your pole sitter. Philip Lindberg is alongside him, and look at the gap, just a few hundredths between them in qualifying. Philip Lindberg, I liked his comment, real race car. John Brownson for DKR Engineering set to line up third on the grid alongside Quintin Joseph in the number 87 CLX Motorsport Ligier JSP 320. Then it's Wolfgang Peyer in the number 12 car, the Racing Experience entry, and some interesting racing experience for Peyer. He is a former Dakar bike racer back in some earlier years. Mikael Doppelmayr in 6th position, rounding out our starting order for this race. He is in the number 64 M Racing outfit. That is the team of Ivan Muller and Jan Erlacher, of course, both world champions in touring car competition, and M Racing is their baby, as it were, and great to have them on the grid with us for this weekend. But it is Danny Soufi, the Virginian-born, but I think largely considers himself Texan driver. I've kind of been in and out watching Danny's career for most of it. He came over in the middle of 2022 to Europe with Conrad Motorsport, having done Mazda Miata racing, or MX-5s to you and I in Europe. Some drifting in a rather special C6 Corvette that I think he might have had his dad have a go at later on after he'd moved over to Europe. But he spent the last 3 years racing in prototypes. He was the vice champion last year in Prototype Cup Germany, and of course before that he was our champion in the Prototype Winter Series. I am expecting quite the race here. It's 50 minutes plus 1 lap. The pit stops vary based on the handicap system. We do get 2 formation laps as well in the prototype, so I've got time to tell you a little bit about that. Effectively, the grade of the driver lineup is what determines your pit stop time. So, because, for example, if you were running bronze only, you would have to be from pit in to pit out 96 seconds in the pit. So not 96 seconds stationary from entering to exiting the pits. You'd need to be in for 96 seconds. No one is doing that, soloing as a bronze or just having a pair of bronzes in the car. So we've got differing pit stops. The all-silver lineups, the rather more potent lineups, are front row of the grid. Danny Soufi and Philip Lindberg, they both have to be in there for 158 seconds, which obviously comes to 2 minutes and 38 seconds, which is a long old pit stop. So both of them are going to have a significant handicap. 3 cars, Lawrence Herr and John Brownson, Mikael Doppelmayr and Pierre Capper, David Drew and Quintin Joseph are all on 129-second pit stops. Matthias Bier Jakobsen and Wolfgang Peyer have 127 seconds in the pit. So effectively everyone else has around 2 minutes and 10, while it's about 2 minutes 40 for the front row of the grid. So that is going to have an effect on the race, certainly, the lengths of those pit stops. Danny Soufi, very familiar with this. And certainly in British club motorsport, there is the time-honoured tradition of the handicap race, where they start in a staggered manner based on the performance of the car. This is almost similar. You get the pure race where everybody is on their pure performance in the first half, and then for the second half, the handicap weaves its chaotic nature on the race, and we usually get quite a thrilling conclusion as a result.
Yes, well, fingers crossed. If they've done their job correctly with figuring out that handicap, so to speak, then yes, fingers crossed, we will get a bit of a grandstand finish. But yeah, early stages, I think we've all got a feeling we know what is likely to happen. But you never know. If you lose track position early on, then that can certainly make life a bit of a challenge going forward. We saw in that GT4 race, not the easiest of places to overtake. So yeah, should be interesting this, but Danny Soufi knows the job at hand, just needs to get this rolling start correct, hold that inside line into turn 1, and as far as he's concerned, set sail, build a lead now, so he's got much less work to do after that pit stop.
So Philip Lindberg will be his primary challenger, we suspect, in the early stages on the outside of the front row. Danish team, High Class Racing. Danish driver Philip Lindberg, who has been racing in TCR Denmark largely over the last 4 years, but has run GT3 cars in his native land as well. But this is quite something else. As he said, this is a proper race car, and that is a proper noise. As they get underway, we are racing, and it is a great start from Danny Soufi. Looks like the CLX Motorsport car getting a good launch as well, but it will be Lindberg in second place, and actually Brownson stays in third place. I actually thought that Quinton Joseph there was going to get through into third place, but he remains there in fourth for the time being. Brownson, a driver with a lot of experience in LMP3 machinery. Quinton Joseph, conversely, has only done a couple of events in LMP3 machinery and only a couple of events prior to that in racing full stop. So an interesting battle going on there for third place, but rather as anticipated, Danny Soufi, familiar car, familiar track, reigning champion and early stage race leader.
And it's that familiarity, really. Oh, mind you, that was a bit of a lock-up dropping down the hill. That was actually the second place car, wasn't it? Soufi already so far ahead. But yeah, it's that familiarity that's allowing him to not only be quick over the course of the weekend, but to be quick straight away at the start of a race. He knows the car, he knows how it will behave on low tyre pressures, on cold tyres maybe. He knows the track, so he knows, having started on the front row before, where to brake into turn one on the opening lap and where to position the car. So all of that familiarity certainly working in his favour, and that is why we expect, at least in this first part of the race, for him to pull away ever so slightly. Right now, Adam, the battle really to focus on seems to be this one for third position.
Yeah, absolutely right. There is Quinton Joseph in fourth position, the Belgian racer who is sharing with David Drew. David, of course, a driver with a lot of experience in LMP3s. Actually first competed in an LMP3 car in 2015. That's the first year of LMP3 racing. So he's been part of the LMP3 landscape from day one. And just 27 years of age as well, so that's a deceptive level of experience for someone who I would still like to consider a young man, because I'm 27 too.
You can imagine how I feel, having reached the dizzying heights of 30 years old last year, and not thrilled about it either. But there you go, racing drivers do seem to get younger and younger all the time, and you know, it is a valid point really, that, isn't it? Because drivers do now appear on our radar from the ages of 14 and 15. It can sometimes feel like they're a hardened veteran, and they haven't even hit their mid-20s yet. So, and of course the talent pool is just so impressive these days. So they come in, they are immediately competitive as a teenager, and a long and prosperous career can follow as a result of that. Pretty prosperous opening lap that for Danny Soufi, only the 3.3 seconds quicker than anybody else on lap one, and already starting to increase that margin on the second lap. Philip Lindberg in second, John Brownson third, actually in the end keeping Quinton Joseph at arm's length. But we'll see whether or not Joseph can bring that gap down a little bit, if anything, being reeled in now slightly by Wolfgang Peyer in the number 12 car, who we just saw on picture heading through the uphill chicane. But in a longer race such as this, the drivers will very much be trying to just settle into a rhythm here in the early stages, let the race come to them. It can be very easy to overdrive in the early stages and use up all of your stuff, so they're going to be taking it a little bit easy maybe, but know really that this race could well be decided in the second half.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like we have a slight transponder issue for a few cars there. The timing screen is doing flips and tricks, but it is indeed Danny Soufi still in the lead of this race. We also got to see, as you were alluding to there, Wolfgang Peyer in the number 12 car. He's got quite the racing background. I need to ask him about it. I'm fairly certain he raced inter-series sports cars about 20 years ago, and some Formula 3 before that as well. What I know for sure is that he, just a matter of 3 or 4 years ago, was racing bikes in the Dakar Rally, and that's about the most arduous thing you can do as a leisure pursuit. Indeed, he was, I think, there for a few years in addition to other rally raid competitions, and it's not often that you can jump in at LMP3 and think to yourself, yeah, this is a bit easier than what I was doing before, but I think he's found a way.
Yeah, that is, I think, probably one of the biggest challenges in motorsport, isn't it? The Dakar in general, but particularly in the two-wheel category. Perhaps no more unforgiving a category of motorsport exists. That's a real achievement. And yeah, this will be a bit of a walk in the park, I would imagine, compared to the things that he's done earlier on in his career. There is Wolfgang Payer heading through the final few corners now. And out onto the main straight. Well, actually a fair distance now behind the next car in front. They've all spread themselves out rather. Not quite as much as the time extreme would have you believe. It's not a 1 minute 10-second lead for, well, anyone, certainly not for Doppelmayr. Danny Sufi, though, with about a 6-second gap, I think, back to Philip Lindbergh in second position. Time extreme maybe now starting to catch up with itself, but well, when you find yourself in some clean air like this, it can be difficult sometimes for a driver, I think, to settle into that rhythm and to sort of, you need someone to gauge from as to how quickly you're going, and when there's no one else in sight, that can be a bit of a challenge. But the team, I'm sure, will be on the radios, keeping them in check with lap times and whatnot. Of course, different drivers like a different level of information being thrown at them. Some drivers want to know everything, and others want the radio communications to be kept to a bare minimum. And there's so much to learn. Working with your team on that is a good way to go.
It's quite surprising, actually, that Philip Lindbergh has fallen off quite so much. The back of Danny Sufi so far in this race, just on 6 seconds back now from our reigning champion in the Prototype Win Series. Of course, they were just a few hundredths apart in qualifying today, so it's quite a surprise, actually, that Lindbergh is dropping back. However, of course, as Izzy alluded to on the grid, largely Philip Lindbergh's racing has happened in TCR competition, which is quite a different ball game from LMP3 cars. We know Lindbergh is very capable, has had some good results in TCR Denmark, but certainly Danny with the edge when it comes to race distances in prototypes.
Yes, and you know, possibly that will affect your confidence in the early stages. Danny, because he's used to high downforce prototypes such as these, he knows, like I said earlier, exactly how hard you can push that in the early stages, whereas Philip, you know, TCR, you have to bed those things in. Cold rear tyres, less downforce to catch you if you get it wrong. So maybe as the race goes on, he'll start getting quicker. He was actually a 1/10 of a second faster than the race leader through the first sector this time. So maybe now starting to pick up the pace a little bit. For third, it's getting a bit closer here. John Brownson and Quentin Joseph are starting to get themselves together a little bit more, I think. So this could be, again, where most of the excitement in this early part of the race is to be found. John Brownson turns his way down through turn number 6. Tricky corner that. It sort of opens out, but goes quite steeply uphill as well. You can see him taking a much different line to Quentin Joseph behind. Much tighter line for the chasing car. We'll see at the end of Sector 2 who got it right. Sector 2, I think, finishes just around the corner from where they are now. Yep, 48.9 for Brownson, 49.1 in the end for Quentin Joseph. So ever so slightly slower, but still very much within range, within sighting range of the man that he is pursuing.
The really exciting thing when you look at it is the level that these teams are at. Of course, Conrad Motorsport, Danny Sufi leading the way there. Both Danny and Conrad these days are regulars at the Nürburgring 24-hour. In second place there, High Class Racing, 35 years of history. And of course, these days, regulars on podiums in Asian Le Mans, European Le Mans, IMSA, all over the sports car racing landscape is High Class Racing. And then in third place, DKR Engineering. They have stood on the LMP2 Pro-Am podium several times at Le Mans 24 hours. And indeed, they have won championships in the European Le Mans Series and the like. John Brownson's car is certainly going to get very fast indeed once Lawrence Herr takes the wheel. Very interesting lineup, those two. Lawrence Herr, 27 years of age, a 3-time champion in LMP3 competition, twice in the Michelin Le Mans Cup, and once in the LMP3 European Le Mans Series class. And of course, John Brownson, 71 years of age. He has been on an upward trajectory through racing quite late in life. Did some SCCA regional single-seater competition, some Star Mazdas, if you remember those, going back a little over 15 years now. And more recently has been running LMP3s for the last 5 or 6 years. That's a lineup that scored podiums in last year's prototype Winter Series, and we have no reason to expect anything less. If anything, I think it's going to be eyes on that P1 at some point in 2025.
That will be the plan. How achievable that will be, I don't know, but certainly they will be hoping for that kind of a result. Much better lap times coming in now for Philip Lindberg as well. It does seem that he's sort of been easing his way into this race. He was still slower, don't get me wrong, than Danny Soufi on the previous lap, but only by about half a second or so, and actually set the outright fastest first sector, so quicker than Danny Soufi has been through the first part of the lap. Admittedly, that is the shortest of the sectors, but he'll take his victories where he can get them here, I think, Philip Lindberg. In fact, he is consistently a tenth or so faster than Danny Soufi in the first half of the lap. There is Philip. He makes his way through the middle sector. Wonder whether maybe that's a setup thing then. Perhaps Philip's gone for a slightly lower downforce setting on the high-class racing car, and lower downforce setting, I should say, quicker in a straight line, but then maybe losing time through the later part of the lap. Again, that would explain maybe why Danny had a bit more confidence on cold tyres.
And I think that's almost a trick of the mind, a driver's instinct. If you go from something with relatively low downforce dependency to something that's massively high performance, you almost instinctively don't want that downforce because it might make the car go through these corners quicker than your brain is quite ready to process. Philip Lindberg, though, very aware of just the potential of race cars. He's a pro driver for sure, and we are seeing him get quicker as well into those 1:35 and putting in a good shift. Of course, both of these drivers are going to lose somewhere in the region of 30 seconds during the pit window. The gap between Soufi and John Brownson a lap ago was 29 seconds. It's now up to 34.7. So actually, as it stands, Soufi now has that pit window disadvantage over the cars that are going to have a shorter pit stop. So that is critical for Soufi, and there are still just under 8 minutes until the pit window opens.
Yes, because Soufi and Lindberg have the same pit stop time, don't they? 158 seconds, so there's no advantage or disadvantage to be gained there. Philip pushing on, though, keeps snatching that brake, I've noticed, into turn 6. I saw that on the very first lap of the race, or maybe lap 2, snatched the brake down there, and I do fear that he may have flat-spotted that left front tyre. Because he keeps on doing it, so that looks like, and again there, look, going into the chicane. Now this is early in the race, I'd say, Adam, to be having to deal with a flat-spotted tyre. That is only going to get worse. They're having a pit stop, but I don't anticipate they would have been planning a tyre change, so that is something he will have to manage for quite a long time, and it ain't going to get any better.
Yeah, no, exactly right. It is going to be a tricky one, and as you said, it was the first lap of the race going to Parabolica Interior that we saw that first lock-up, and the problem with the lock-up is it can build. That flat spot can grow, the vibrations get worse and worse. It's one of those mistakes that leads to further mistakes, whether you actually want or whether you're actually doing anything wrong or not. He could only make a braking error really once, but once you've got that flat spot there, it can be very hard to avoid further locking up.
Yes, and that is something a lot of people don't really know about until they do it.
Yes.
Sometimes one of those, a bit like pad knockoff is another thing that you only really learn from when it happens to you, and then you never forget it because it's a pretty terrifying feeling barreling off into a corner and not having any braking capability. This battle continues to bubble away, doesn't it, between John Brownson and Quentin Joseph. On the previous lap, Quentin in 4th position, well, 3/10 slower actually, so the gap must have come down a fair bit a few laps ago. They were 3 seconds apart, they're now 2.8 seconds apart, but I think they've been closer than this. So again, gaps ebbing and flowing. They both actually did their personal best laps on the previous circuit. John Brownson and Quentin Joseph now around 40 seconds adrift of the race leaders, but our closest pair of drivers on track.
And they still, of course, owe us a pit stop, as everyone does, and both of those pit stops will be 2 minutes and 9 seconds in length. So assuming they come in at a relatively similar time during the pit window, it's going to be very interesting to see how Lawrence Herr and David Drew come up against each other. Of course, sometimes you see the bronze driver in a lineup. As soon as the window opens, I'm in, get him in there, let's see what happens. I'm going to sit back on the sofa. But maybe they've decided to go halfway. It's hard to know, but we will find out. Very similar tales of the tape between those two, between Lawrence Herr and David Drew, both 27 years old, both with championships under their belts and several years in LMP3 machinery, as we see Michael Doppelmayr there, I think, getting put a lap down by Danny Soufi. Doppelmayr, who is sharing with Pierre Caffer, of course, a winner in the GT2 car class at the Le Mans 24 Hours now, going back over 15 years. Those two have shared cars a lot in recent years and have had several successes along the way. But for Doppelmayr, this is a new experience. He's only really done the lion's share of his driving in GT3 or GT2 machinery. Moving into LMP3 is a big step. These cars do have traction control like a GT3 car, but it's a fairly primitive traction control versus a GT3 car, and in fact a lot of the teams will not use the traction control even if it is available to them. I think in the Ligiers typically teams do, in the Duquesnes and the Ginettas usually not, because the car is better out of the corners without it. And they don't have ABS, which again compounds issues for Philip Lindbergh, who appears to be flat spotting his front left. So for someone like Michael Doppelmayr, who has done so much in GT racing and is of course the AM driver of the lineup, this first ever endeavour into LMP3 is a steep learning curve.
Yeah, certainly is. They're tricky cars to drive by all accounts, aren't they? Because as you said, they don't have a huge amount in the way of electronic aids to help the drivers, but they're so powerful. They have downforce, but they're quite heavy. So there are lots of things that should make them pretty nice to drive, pretty easy, but they are almost always balanced out by something that makes it a bit trickier than you might expect. So they are challenging cars, but certainly the likes of Danny Soufi, he's cracked the code, hasn't he? He's figured out the way in which to get one of these round a track quickly. Philip Lindbergh there, I don't think could quite figure out which way Doppelmayr was going there, so just a bit of a hesitation on accelerating out of turn number 6, but he does, in the end, safely negotiated the now lapped car. Makes his way up the hill with 32.5 minutes or so still to go, and still the closest battle remaining, that one for third place, where actually now, Adam, they are less than 2 seconds apart. That is now, I think, about as close as Brownson and Quentin Joseph have been so far in this race.
Yeah, absolutely right. Quentin Joseph is closing in on Brownson. Brownson, I suspect from memory last year, he was typically pretty resolute on handing the car over early doors in the pit window. There are just 2 minutes now before the window opens, with 30 minutes of the race plus 1 lap remaining, and we will see how that shakes out. I'm personally quietly rooting for DKR and CLX to be on the same page as to their pit windows, because I think Lawrence and David Drew will certainly put on a show in the second half if things stay as they are. And in fact, a time delta worth keeping our eyes on is that between High Class Racing and DKR, second and third places, is currently about 37 seconds. So again, that has eclipsed by some 8-9 seconds the pit window time. But again, things can go wrong in these pit stops as well. We do often see the LMP3 cars struggle to fire back up again after a couple of minutes at idle. That's a fairly consistent trait. So who knows? We could end up with a 3-way battle for second between 3 pro drivers, 2 of whom are vastly experienced in LMP3s, 1 of whom is not, but does come from touring car racing, which means he will be equipped to defend the position.
I see where you're going with that. Yes, that could be a rather tasty battle, couldn't it? If the cards fall correctly for us, the neutrals, then that could be a really interesting race or conclusion to the race in about 20 minutes' time or so. Uphill there goes Quentin Joseph, now sort of dropping back. It's been a real yo-yo effect, this, hasn't it, between Brownson and Quentin, an elasticated gap that shrinks down to less than 2 seconds, then went back out by a second last time around, as maybe there's a bit of inconsistency creeping into their driving, the odd mistake maybe to be had. And Quentin Joseph makes his way through the chicane. We got a glimpse of Danny Sufi through the chicane a few laps ago. It honestly looked like he had twice the amount of downforce of everybody else. The cornering speed, the change of direction, that is a driver who is perfectly attuned to these kind of cars. You know, if you're going that little bit quicker into the corner, you carry that little bit more speed at the apex, that can make a big, big difference to your lap times.
John Brownson in at the very first opportunity. The pit window is but 10 seconds old, and the DKR Engineering Duquesne runs down to its box. Danny Sufi made some changes to the car between yesterday and this morning, and he said, we'll have to see if these work. Yeah, it does appear that they're working at the moment. Danny actually is doing a bit more than usual this weekend. Daniel from Conrad Motorsport is not here this weekend. I believe his job is usually data engineering, and Danny Sufi was hunched over the laptop this morning doing his own data engineering, and he said, yeah, no, Danny's not here this weekend, so I'm doing this as well. I was like, wow, okay. He really is kind of on an apprenticeship with Conrad Motorsport. He's involved in the day-to-day operations of the team as well as the driving. Wolfgang Peyer hands over to a very exciting young talent then down at Racing Experience. It is Matthias Bier Jakobsen, the 18-year-old, getting strapped in, the Danish talent of the year 2024, the reigning Nordic 4 champion as well. He won this seat for free based on the Racing Experience shootout process. For very minimal output, he has got himself a seat in an LMP3 car for the season. He's due to do some radical racing in Scandinavia. Room for additional programs, but nothing confirmed yet. But based on what we've seen from him in his young career so far, I think that car might be about to fly.
Yes, I think you may well be right. Interesting there to see the team, the Racing Experience team, letting air out of the rear tyres. That might look like a strange thing to do to a racing car, but that's just because the tyre temperatures and pressures, they just get so high and you lose grip as a result. As I said earlier, it's not necessarily tyre wear that is the issue so much as tyre temperature and pressure. That's what the tyres are super sensitive to, and so they just let a little bit of pressure out of the tyres, give the drivers a bit of grip. The tyres are moving to right. We've got a stall there in the car. I think it was a lovely noise it makes eventually when it leaves its pit box, but that, I fear, was a couple of seconds lost to it, as something you actually predicted may happen earlier on.
Yeah, these can be tricky beasts to get back off and underway. So then, the 12 car is on its way out. Already exited the pits has Lawrence Herr in the number 3, so he's out there. Lindberg and Sufi have continued on their way. Everyone else has either served or is serving their pit stops. So it's only Sufi and Lindberg we have left to see in the pits. Doppelmayr has come in to hand over to Pierre Caffer, and the Lawrence Herr and John Brownson car has had their shift. We see that car on screen at the moment now with Lawrence Herr at the wheel. And of course, a point of interest here, we should keep following this number 3 car for the next few corners, because the next question is, well, where does David Drew come out in comparison? Because he came into the pits a lap later, so you would theorize that potentially the gap will have gone slightly in Lawrence Herr's favor. But let's wait and see how it shakes out.
Already, I would say the body language of this car just looks a little bit more attacking, doesn't it? A bit more decisive, maybe. So Lawrence Herr pushing on. There is the car look coming out of the pit lane, and Lawrence Herr is going to go through. So Lawrence Herr will definitely be ahead of the number 87 car. By how far, we'll have to wait and see. But David Drew hadn't yet got to the pit lane exit line, so still stuck on the pit lane speed limiter. And look, that's an enormous gap now between the two of them. Still, the 87 car hasn't appeared. Now it does, but I'd say that's got to be getting on for 10 seconds or so now, adrift of a podium.
Yeah, 11 or 12, I reckon, at the very least. That's a big gap between the number 3 and the 87. David Drew is good. I'm not sure if he's that good. We're going to find out, though. Danny Sufi is into the pit lane to make his mandatory stop. Again, you can see there's some tyre pressure adjustments. It's a fairly leisurely pit stop at just over 2.5 minutes, so they've got time. I'm sure if Danny was so willing, he could probably hop out and see how his data's doing before he gets back in the car. But he does continue to sit there in waiting, which has handed the lead, at least temporarily, to Philip Lindbergh. So the Ligier from High Class Racing leads the way and is the only car left to serve a pit stop. He's still got 5 minutes to do so before the window closes. There is the number 3, that is Lawrence Herr, and he is on the charge, as we said. Aggressive body language. That car is hustling.
Well, he's just set the fastest first sector of anybody, so quicker than anything Danny Sufi managed. Well, in fact, it was Philip Lindbergh, wasn't it, who was the Sector 1 maestro earlier on, but personal best in the second sector too means that this car number 3, has now set the fastest lap of the race. So Lawrence Herr not only looking likely to defend third position, could he prove to be a bit of a problem for the top 2? We still have 24.5 minutes of this race to go, and he is absolutely flying. He's just gone quicker again in Sector 1. Interestingly, number 87, which is the David Drew-driven machine, on his outlap has set the fastest final sector of anybody. So there's some pace in these drivers who are fresh in for the second half of the race. They know exactly where they stand, or they will do in a few minutes, in relation to everybody else once all of the stops have been done. There is the confirmation of the fastest lap by Lawrence Herr, but he is already going quicker on this lap that we're watching.
Yeah, Lawrence Herr is a almost second to none talent when it comes to LMP3s. Meanwhile, I can hear Danny Sufi's car firing up from the pit lane. That's the good thing about the LMP3s. You could almost audibly call this race without any pictures. Here comes Sufi. Of course, the pit limiter area continues on well down towards the first corner. So you've got this agonizing moment here of just driving along what kind of feels like you should already be kind of off the limiter, but no, he has to wait. And there is Pierre Caffer at the back of the field. Yes, but I'm sure that car is going to be lapping a lot faster now as well, with Pierre at the helm.
Yeah, so there goes Danny Sufi back out on track. More and more purple sectors coming in from drivers elsewhere. Another fastest lap look for Lawrence Herr. So a 1:34.1, Sufi's best lap so far. A 35.1, that's a full second quicker than Danny Sufi has been so far in this race. Now, maybe Danny was keeping a little bit in reserve. I don't know, but that will be a little bit concerning. As big a lead as he's had a longer pit stop than some of these drivers behind, so they're closer to him now than they were before the stops, and that gap could keep coming down. David Drew now actually steals the fastest lap away from Lawrence Herr, only by a few hundredths of a second, but yeah, this could be about to get quite interesting.
It could be. I think so long as Danny's pace remains as is and doesn't drop, he should be okay. But let's see how this unfolds. Into the pits comes our effective second place man, momentary race leader Philip Lindbergh. So he is not going to swap. He's a solo driver just like Danny Sufi. So we'll see where he comes out. I think not so much in relation to Sufi. I think it's going to be the delta between himself and Lawrence Herr that really is the tale there as to how this podium is going to stack up. Here is David Drew. So David Drew heading through the S's and towards the parabolic Ayrton Senna once again with 21 minutes and 35 seconds left on the clock. Philip Lindbergh is going to be stationary for quite some time yet. and we'll have to see what that delta looks like.
Well, I mean, his stop is 29 seconds longer than the stop was for the number 3 car, and the number 3 car is going quicker than he has been. So I really do fear that Philip Lindbergh may not be in second place when he comes out of the pits. A 33.7 now for David Drew. A 33.7. Danny Sufi has done a 35.1. I think that was a full flying lap, wasn't it, for Sufi last time? Sorry, that was his best. Yes, it was a full flying lap, but that was quite a bit slower then than the chasing pack. It's all going to shake out in the next few laps, but yeah, Danny Sufi, well, 20.4 seconds, let's call it. He was ahead of Lawrence Herr, but on the previous lap went, well, quite a bit slower. That was his out lap, though, so we'll see how this one goes. Half a second dropped in Sector 1, though, Adam, so still, despite a personal best in Sector 1 for Sufi, he can't match the number 3 car.
No, that's going to be compelling. I think that the high-class racing car will come out in second because it was about 40 seconds, in fact, a little bit more than 40 seconds clear prior to the window. I think it's going to be quite a narrow thing, though. We really need to see the car ahead of this. Number 3 of Lawrence Herr, who will be coming through the final corner and down the main straight now. Reason being that we could be about to see, if not a change of position, certainly an important part of the race. And here is Philip Lindbergh. He is heading down the pit lane. He will just about, I think, be in second place. I think it's going to be less than 5 seconds between them, though. And he, of course, has got tyres that will be coming just back up to temperature. It's
going to be very close. Look, he accelerates away. That's not 5 seconds. It's maybe 5 car lengths by the time they get up to speed. I thought it was going to be close. And, of course, he has got to get back up to speed here. Defends into turn number 3. But there's no defence against Lawrence Herr, who is fully in the groove now and sweeps around the outside. So it didn't quite change in the pit lane, but it did change very soon after Philip Lindbergh got back out onto the circuit. So that is a change for position. And Lindbergh, of course, having already done a stint, in theory, should be able to get up to speed straight away. But Lawrence Herr is quite comfortably at the moment. Well, he and David Drew, the 2 fastest drivers on the track on that particular lap. Lindbergh did a 34.2. About 4 tenths quicker than Danny Sufi. So yeah, he'll need more than that to win the race, but second place all of a sudden is a very much a reality.
Yeah, that is very impressive work there from Lawrence Herr. He's been doing qualifying lap after qualifying lap, and now we see the impact of his efforts into second position then. The next question, of course, will be, will Philip Lindbergh stay ahead of David Drew, who is setting fastest lap after fastest lap? I think David is going to be somewhere in the region of 5 seconds behind for the time being. We'll wait and see on the timing screen for confirmation of that. I think Philip Lindbergh rather putting his hands up and accepting that he wasn't going to be able to hold off Lawrence Herr just after coming out of the pit lane. But now Lindbergh is going to have to focus on retaining a podium. He's about 6.4 seconds clear of David Drew,
who is now into the 133.1s, a 133.180 for David Drew. So the official gap is 6.4 seconds between Lindbergh third and Drew in fourth position. I'll be honest with you, Adam, 25 minutes ago I wasn't expected to be this excited with the second half of the race beckoning, but what a fantastic idea this pit stop handicap system, should we call it, has been, because it has transformed the race and given us something to really get excited about heading into the final quarter of an hour or so. Lawrence Herr is now within 20 seconds of the race leader, although on the previous lap only a half a tenth or so quicker than said race leader Danny Sufi, who I think is now settling into things. He's realised he's still got a big gap. The team, I'm sure, are updating him all the time about what that gap is, and really the battling now is going on behind him. Can David Drew catch Philip Lindbergh? And if he can and get through, how much further ahead will Lawrence Herr be?
Yeah, Sufi lapping in the 34s now. He was a bit off this time by a 34.8 his previous lap. Personal best a 34.3, so he's got a little bit more in the pocket should he need to use it, and maybe he's just showing us that before getting back into a steady pace. The gap between himself and Lawrence Herr under 20 seconds, 19 seconds between them, with 16.5 minutes plus 1 lap left to go. He should be fairly safe there, but there is still a long way to go, and Estoril is a circuit that can weave quite a chaotic imprint on a race. Danny Soufi knows that all too well, of course. Remember last year in the wet conditions, ended up aquaplaning and having an impact with Sandro Holtzum. Unfortunately, in the very first race of the season. This time around, it's certainly better weather and no plain sailing because he isn't having to sail on Saturday. Sunday might be a different story, though, according to the radars. We'll keep our eyes posted on that. Interesting to see that Philip Lindberg, while he is being caught up here by David Drew, also, I think, getting his personal best laps in. So coming back out onto the circuit and being around very, very experienced LMP3 drivers, he seems to be just gaining a little bit as a result.
Yes, I think you are correct. Oh, that's a good place for that van to apart. Through the kink and into the uphill chicane comes David Drew. Yeah, things now a bit more static. David Drew is still the quickest man on track, but not by the colossal margins that we were seeing earlier on. On the previous lap, he was a full second quicker than the leader. Of course, the problem is that he is 30 seconds or so adrift of Danny Soufi out in front, but he's not that far behind Philip Lindberg, so that battle, I suspect, is going to be one which is joined very shortly. There is Soufi heading uphill, and is that Pierre Caffer catching him back up to unlap himself? I think it is, because we sort of said that Pierre Caffer would be rapid in the second half of the race. He was another driver who I noticed was lighting up the timing screens earlier on. His best lap is a 33.7, which is actually almost as quick as anything that those at the front have been doing. It's a shame he's a lap down, but he gets now to show Danny Soufi that he is every bit as quick as him.
Yeah, Danny has had some very interesting combatants over his racing career in LMP3s. Last year, of course, he was going up against Daniel Kalvitz, a former GT Masters champion here at the Circuito Estoril. Had some great fighting as well in the second phase of the race from memory. Rinaldi Racing versus Conrad Motorsport. And of course, in the summer in Prototype Cup Germany, he looked at the entry list for the Nürburgring and saw some chap called Ralf Schumacher on the entry list. And that was yet another curveball. LMP3 racing is very interesting because there are talented youngsters who hop in at an early age, such as Matthias Jakobsen, who we have here today. You do get gentleman drivers who maybe just want a taste of that Le Mans experience, whether they want to progress further forward or not. But then you've got these career professionals, these seasoned professional drivers like a Pierre Caffer, who maybe I think he would admit is in the latter half of his career, certainly, given it started when Formula Opel Lotus was still a thing. But here he is, paired up with Mikael Doppelmayr and having a great time. Meanwhile, off camera, we have had a position switch.
We have. Third place has now gone the way of David Drew. We saw him closing in on Philip Lindberg. Philip then didn't have a particularly quick lap, a 37.6, about 2.3 seconds or so slower than David Drew, who has gone through. Now, of course, some of that time will have been lost with the overtake, but more time being lost there heading up through turn number 3, because Philip Lindberg's car bounced wide over one of the bumps, I think, and very nearly found itself beyond track limits. So Philip Lindberg struggling a bit now in this second half of the race. Physically demanding race, I'd imagine. These cars will be very warm inside on a day like this. They are not the easiest cars to drive, as we documented earlier on. The G-forces through the high-speed corners will be a challenge too. So Philip Lindberg perhaps starting to feel that now as we move towards the final 10 minutes. And unfortunately, his podium position looks as though it's slipping away.
Still was very amused by his analysis of the car on the pre-grid with Izzy Browning, just like, yeah, proper race car, proper race car, not a touring car. Seemed to be very happy to be at the wheel of an LMP3. And of course, you have to imagine running a LMP3 car with a team like High Class Racing, who compete in the very highest echelons of sports car competition. This is a sign of things to come for Lindberg's career. He will be very eager to impress and prove his mettle as the season goes on. Of course, we have the Ligier and the Duqueine chassis on the circuit at the moment, and it is Ligier from Duqueine at the front. These two cars are kind of the primary options that people have taken with these second generation LMP3 cars. The same was largely true in the first generation as well. Once all of the chassis were introduced, it was kind of a gradual introduction. But it does appear that we are going to get a bit more diversity of chassis in the 2025 season onwards. The third generation cars we saw earlier this week here at Estoril, the third generation Ades, the V6 powered Gen 3 LMP3 car, doing some testing with Nielsen Racing that they publicly acknowledged on their social medias, and that's a good sign. A team as prominent as Nielsen running the Ades, which has been possibly the least favoured chassis. And then you also have Ginetta, of course, who are making big strides to improve that third generation car and are confirmed to be heading into the European Le Mans Series for the first time in quite a few years in 2025. So really interesting to see the third generation cars seemingly getting a bit more, all of the marks on the top grids, which is something I think a lot of people have been longing for. But equally, there's this old soul part of me that just doesn't want to let go of these incredible sounding V8s.
And it is the noise, really, isn't it, that makes them so special. A smaller engine might actually make them nicer to drive in some ways. It will make them lighter, certainly, which we said earlier on is one of the challenges of these cars. But and I know this is easy for me to say from the comfort of a commentary box, I don't really think racing cars should be too easy to drive. We like to see the drivers challenged, and we like to have a nice soundtrack to go along with that. And certainly that's something that the previous iterations of LMP3 cars have very much given us. And yeah, even with only 6 of them on the grid here, the noise as they left at the start of the race was pretty awesome. So yeah, that will be missed, but motorsport moves on, I suppose. Smaller capacity engines are generally the way that things are going, and I'm sure with the technology available these days, the cars will be every bit as quick and every bit as spectacular to drive, and continue hopefully to attract, as you said earlier on, this wide range of drivers to the category. That is a bit of a rarity these days in motorsport.
And here's a bit of a phantom battle, because Pierre Caffer says, yes, I do want to unlap myself, Danny. Danny Soufi, last time by, the lap previous to this, set his best of the race, a 34.0, well, just over a lap and a half ago now. So he was getting hustled on by Pierre Caffer, but Pierre running at the back of the field, having a good time, but spins! Oh no, just after we were saying that he's unlapped himself, he's really hustling the car. The rear end lets go, and again, a great example of just how challenging these LMP3 cars are. Even someone like Pierre, the adrenaline starts to flow. He's gotten through, he's gotten past the leader in this kind of phantom battle, but then the rear lets go.
The next words out of my mouth, Adam, were about to be, this is not ideal for Danny Soufi, because this could pose a distraction to the race leader that he could do without. And a distraction is definitely what that was, wasn't it? Pierre Caffer spinning in front of him. I'm sure Danny's eyes would have widened significantly when that happened. He picked the right way to go, thankfully, and at least because he had at the start of the lap a nearly 17-second lead over Lawrence Herr, he was able to just roll off the throttle, hit the brakes maybe even, to safely negotiate that situation. That will, of course, have shrunk the lead margin slightly. We'll see exactly by how much at the end of the lap. I'm sure he will still be feeling reasonably confident, but that was a situation he would have rather avoided for sure. Of course, from Pierre Caffer's perspective, he was probably thinking, right, I've unlapped myself from the leader, better get on with this now, hadn't I? I don't want to sit here and hold him up. And the very next corner overdid it slightly, but 7.5 minutes to go. There's a chance, I suppose, Pierre could still catch back up again. It is now the length of the pit straight, I think, between the leader and second place. We'll get that gap for you momentarily when Lawrence Herr crosses the line. 14.5 seconds. Danny Soufi won't be too panicked about that, having survived what was a hairy moment.
Hairy moment indeed there for the race leader. Pierre Caffer goes by, and as we see, Pierre Caffer then ends up behind him again, just losing the traction there on turn-in. And what did you spot there, Andy?
He just went over the white line on the left-hand side of the road. He wasn't fully on the dirt, but there's a bit of dirt, I think, that's been dragged onto the road, and just saw a little kick-up of dust as he turned in, right when he was leaning on that left rear tyre, which I suspect was the reason for the spin.
Yeah, fine margins, isn't there, between those fast laps he was putting in and just going over the cliff, as it were. And that's what we've seen on this occasion. Philip Lindberg now running pretty lonely there in 4th position. As we alluded to, TCR Denmark, but also the Danish Endurance Championship in 2021, which he had a role in helping a team win in a GT3 Audi back in 2021. So he had that trophy added to his cabinet and has been a podium finisher and a race winner in TCR Denmark. I must say, very handsome and very Danish car, the high-class racing number 20. It's wearing the correct colours. That left front is, though, probably looking a bit more like a 50p piece now.
Yeah, it's not going to be a comfy ride, is it, I don't think, for Philip Lindberg, who will be probably quite grateful to see the checkered flag in 6 minutes or so. It's been a frustrating race, really. Ran in second for so long earlier on, managing that flat spot and still keeping a relatively strong pace, but just came out of the pits immediately into trouble and just never really got a chance to properly settle into the second half of the race. And yeah, very much managing this situation now with the left front tyre into the closing stages. But if there is a bit of promise to be taken from this race, it's that he had podium potential. It just hasn't quite fallen his way on this occasion, but he'll be hopeful that that changes tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, goodness me, the rear end stepping out on him there, but he actually did quite a good job to keep it pointed in approximately the correct direction. Of course, his big question mark will be, okay, I was just off of Danny in qualifying. Why was that not the case in the race? And he and the team will look at the data and try and learn from it as best possible. And of course, that is a part of it as well. Danny Sufi, make no questions, no doubts about it. He is here to defend his championship. This is taken very seriously by him. The Prototype Win Series is taken very seriously by all of the competitors, but there is also that element for those taking their first steps into this style of car, just like Philip Lindberg, of learning for the future, wherever that future is, including further seasons of Prototype Win Series.
Yeah, exactly that, but there will be a little bit of head scratching, I would imagine, in the high-class racing camp this evening, wondering what changed after qualifying. Of course, the most obvious thing that changed is that they dumped a lot more fuel in the car after qualifying, and I wonder whether that just changed the balance of the car in a way that he and the team weren't anticipating. Maybe you do have to alter the setup on a car such as this quite dramatically between qualifying and the race, and that is because of the extra weight of a full tank of fuel, or nearly full tank of fuel. So perhaps that was the issue, but hopefully they can come up with some answers for tomorrow, and we'll see him at least well and truly in the fight for the podium for the duration of the race. This race has 3.5 minutes plus 1 lap still to go. The lead gap is 12.5 seconds now between Danny Sufi and Lawrence Herr, but Lawrence hasn't come under the assault that I perhaps anticipated he would from David Drew. Those two, their lap times have sort of balanced out now a little bit in the latter stages. David Drew is still a little bit quicker than Lawrence Herr, but not enough to bridge what is at the moment a 6.5 second gap. So, barring any late race dramas, I think the podium position's pretty set, but they are a lot closer at this end of the race than they were about 40 minutes ago.
And I must correct myself for Danny's benefit, if anything, because he will tell me off for this. He was actually just over 2 seconds faster than anyone else in quali. They were 32 and 34.8, but my brain was processing that very wrong indeed. So Danny will be saying, no, I knew I had the pace going into this race. 32.813 was his pole time. 34.858 was the time for Philip Lindberg. So actually Lindberg wasn't that close to the ultimate pace. That said, though, he was quicker than the efforts of Lawrence Herr and David Drew in qualifying. So he'll be looking to fight for a podium on Sunday when we do 50 minutes plus 1 lap all over again. And of course, that also, 32.813, tells you that Danny definitely has something in the pocket, just in case he needs it, because his best lap of the race, 34.0. It's not realistic to always expect a quali time in the race, but certainly, I think if he needed to go into the 33s on race pace, he can.
That's interesting, though, isn't it, then, that Lawrence Herr and David Drew have been faster than him in the race, but not in qualifying. As you say, maybe he's driving at 90% because that's all he needs to do, but intriguing nonetheless that they seem not only closer to his pace, but indeed faster over the course of this race run. I'm anticipating 2 more laps to go, probably, in this race, because by the time this time he will come across the line with 1 minute and 15 seconds to go. The next time around there'll be no seconds to go, and we have that bonus lap in at the end, which I'm sure he will negotiate, hopefully trouble-free. Accelerates onto the pit straight with there Pierre Caffer off in the distance does Lawrence Herr. 12.4 seconds now the gap to the race leader, and his margin back to David Drew is, well, 4.9, so it's coming down a bit more rapidly now, but again, I suspect Lawrence Herr is very much managing the pace now as we run towards the checkered flag.
An observation, if I may. DKR Engineering, one thing I really enjoy about them is they show up to the Prototype Win Series with a nearly bare carbon fibre car. Last year, it had a little orange nose tip. This year, the airbox is painted in a kind of slightly off blue. But is it just me, or does it look quite a lot like a Conrad Motorsport car? Especially from above.
Yeah, I don't think they thought that one through, did they? Yeah, that's... well, they're gradually adding some colour to the car anyway, but I'm like you, I quite like the sort of naked carbon fibre effect.
Yes.
And when you get to see that car up close, actually, it really does look like a proper bit of kit, doesn't it? The liveries can sometimes disguise the intricate design of a high downforce car such as these ones. So, yeah, a pleasant effect for sure. Danny Soufi heads off the final corner, though, with 1 more lap of the Estoril circuit to be completed before he claims the first Prototype Winter Series win of the year.
Yeah, 1 lap to go here, of course. We've still got more racing to bring you. The GT Winter Series will be out next. Alessio Ruffini last year showed up with a bare carbon fibre Lamborghini. I begged him not to put decals on it. It's come back this year, very decaled indeed. Danny Soufi, though, on the final lap of the race, as we've said, going through towards turn 3 now, the Lamy bend. Very difficult corner. Camber is very iffy. We just saw it claim Pierre Caffer earlier on, of course. And getting the traction right out of that corner is an immense challenge. Curva VIP, and then onto the back straight. Of course, there is a kink there. It is called turn 5. A turn in this car, it absolutely is not. Although in the rain, as we saw last year, yeah, it is. Turn 6, Parabolica interior, then downhill towards Arella for the final time. For Danny Soufi, this race really has been a controlled exercise. The defending champion didn't always have it his own way. He was consistent. He wasn't always at the very front, though. He got some challenges from, in some cases, part-time entries during 2024. In 2025, the season is kicking off in the best way possible. 1 final bend between himself and the checkered flag. The Parabolica Ayrton Senna gives way to the kilometre-long main straight. And for Danny Soufi, it is win number 1 for car number 1. He wins the first Prototype Win Series event of the season. Pierre Caffer crosses the line second, but he is 6th and a lap down. Second in the standings. Lawrence Herr across the line to take that silver medal position, as it were. And David Drew rounds out the podium places. Both of those drivers were homing in on Soufi, and of course they will be starting the Sunday race. So I think the first half for Sunday is going to be quite the thriller. Philip Lindberg is the car we expect to see next in 4th position. He's just coming out of the final corner now, and he will cross the line in his first LMP3 race to a very strong result and a good consistent outing as a whole. Matthias Bier Jakobsen will take 5th position. The youngster, we haven't seen that much of him in this second phase of the race, but he has been there in the 1 minute 33s as well, setting consistent and very quick pace. In fact, his fastest lap better than Danny Sufi's fastest lap in the race. So Matthias Bjerre-Jacobsen really showing his stuff in his first LMP3 race, and of course he will have the opportunity to take the start on Sunday and put the car into a strong position for Wolfgang Peyer in the second phase on Sunday. And then in 6th place already across the line, having finished a lap down, of course, being Pierre Caffer. So that is everybody across the line. And it is a win for Conrad Motorsport for Danny Sufi, the American and the Austrian flag German-based team, having a very strong opening to their 2025 Prototype Winter Series campaign. Prototypes alone, though, might not be all we see them in. There are plans to get a Lamborghini GT3 car out next week at Portimao in the GT Winter Series as well. So lots of exciting stuff on the imminent horizon for Conrad Motorsport, and indeed for us here in the GEDLICH Racing paddock, as one of the famed teams of European sports car racing looks to perhaps expand their efforts a little bit more next week. Of course, they've still got the Sunday race to look forward to here in the Prototype Winter Series, and I doubt it's one that Danny Sufi is going to have all his own way on the Sunday. So there we see Sufi trundling in to the pit lane. Our winning driver, fabulous sound of that Ligier on idle as he pulls up and will celebrate a win along with the team. Franz Conrad is here. He was also in their second Ligier yesterday, doing a bit of a sighting run to see how he was feeling in the LMP. He had some injuries last year that really prevented him from doing much racing, as is usually his wont. And Franz is the first man to greet Danny Sufi and say, good job. I think these two have a really positive relationship between the two of them. Franz Conrad mentoring Danny Sufi, and Franz is the epitome of a driver that has seen it all and done it twice. So he is really a brilliant driver to learn from, and Danny certainly has been taking lessons in abundance from the experienced Austrian. There is the view from inside the car, the P1 board awaiting, and we look forward to seeing more out of the Prototype Winter Series on Sunday. We will soon get some reaction from down there in the pit lane. Of course, Danny will be rehydrating, wanting to debrief with the engineers, but he's always a good one for a conversation as well, so we should hear from him in the next few moments as the drivers make their way up to the podium. And in fact, right on cue, Izzy is with Danny now.
I am indeed with Danny Sufi. Danny, number one on the car, number one on track. That looked like a pretty nice Saturday afternoon drive for you.
Yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed it. Nice flag-to-flag finish. Car was great, so huge thank you to the team. They killed it from the get-go. But yeah, it was just all about conserving tire. I had no idea that I was in P1 after the stop. I thought it was P3 or something, because for sure, like, the gap wouldn't have been big enough, but that was nice to see, so yeah.
And you were lapping cars early on, but then one went to unlap himself and spun in front of you. So did that give you a bit of a shock, bit of a heart in your mouth moment?
I kind of saw it coming, but no, I was shocked with his pace. I mean, to be that rapid was impressive, but no, I saw it coming, and I knew which direction he was going to go, so I just went the other way.
And you've got some very fast drivers who are going to be starting the race tomorrow. So do you anticipate that it's going to be the same easy race for you tomorrow, or a little bit more challenging?
No, I was thinking in the car I should be grateful for today, because tomorrow is going to be hard for sure.
All right, well, congratulations. Another race tomorrow. So we'll let you go up to the podium and celebrate, but congratulations.
Thank you very much.
All right, we will send it back up to you, Adam, in commentary. A very happy Danny Sufi.
Yeah, Danny Sufi, I had a feeling he'd be satisfied with that, but very interesting to know. He didn't know he was leading right there until close to the end of the race. But leading he was, lights to flag in our first prototype Winter Series race of the season. A champion's drive in the inaugural stages of his title defence for sure. And the young driver who went back home to Austin over the holiday period for Thanksgiving and Christmas, now back here in Europe. And I'm sure his family will have been watching on from Texas as well. And they will be happy to see that he is putting in the same shift that we've come to expect somewhat in the prototype Winter Series from Danny Sufi. By no means was he peerless last year, but he was the champion for a reason, of course, and we've seen it again in 2025. Let's take a look back at the first prototype Winter Series race of the season. The V8 Thunder of the second generation 5.6 litre V8 LMP3 cars roared into life to the thrill of the fans. As you can see, a great turnout of fans for this free to attend event. The GT Prototype and GT4 Winter Series, and plenty of fans enjoying the action as we see them there. But it was a drag race to the line between Lindberg and Sufi as the race got underway. Certainly Sufi got the better of the starts, and Lindberg unfortunately couldn't really match Danny Sufi in the early stages. An early lead, a clear lead for Sufi through the first few turns. Meanwhile, John Brownson and Quinton Joseph, who were having a bit of a scrap for third and fourth position. Wolfgang Peyer behind them as well in the number 12 Racing Experience car, and Michael Doppelmayr at the rear of the field during these first stages of the race. While Wolfgang Peyer was somewhat lonely, as was Doppelmayr behind him, it was a close run thing for third place. Brownson was only ever a couple of seconds clear of the Belgian Quinton Joseph in this early phase of the race. Of course, the first 20 minutes fairly steady going for everybody, but the pit window would do its thing at the halfway point of the race and shuffle up the deck a little bit in this prototype Winter Series race. There you can see the gap about as big as it got in the battle for third and fourth position. Quinton Joseph would sometimes be getting close to the rear wing of Brownson. Then Brownson would respond. It was a high-speed chess match for third and fourth position between DKR Engineering and CLX Motorsport, of course, formerly known as Cool Racing. Meanwhile, for Philip Lindberg, it was a battle against his own front left tyre for quite a long part of this race, having to deal with some tyre lockup on occasion. But all in all, putting in a good shift at this time in second position. However, of course, the two drivers behind him, or the two cars behind him, would be taken over by pro drivers for the second phase of the race. And not only that, but they would be with a 30-second shorter pit stop owing to the pit stop handicap system we have here in the prototype Winter Series. So 129 seconds for the cars behind him, 158 for himself. That was a high pressure scenario for Philip Lindberg, and as we'd find out, second place wasn't going to stay his for long. Danny Sufi was comfortable in the race lead, and further back in the field it was fairly clear running for Wolfgang Peyer as well. The ex-Dakar driver, though, rider, I should say, handing over to Matthias Jakobsen, who just struggled slightly to get the car out of the pit lane, but eventually he did. This was the shift, or rather the move back into second place for Lawrence Her and DKR Engineering. Or at the time, I should say, it was third position there for Her over over David Drew, sorry. Danny Sufi exited back out into the race lead, while Philip Lindberg was, in reality, our race leader for 1 or 2 laps before he served his pit stop. We thought he'd come back out in second place, at least I thought he would, by a few seconds, but as we found out later on, post pit stop, he wouldn't be in second place for long. He exited the pit lane, and just behind him would be the DKR Engineering number 3 of Lawrence Herr. I think Lindberg realised keeping his powder dry was perhaps the way forward. Didn't fight too hard up against Lawrence Herr, who was released into second place. Shortly thereafter, David Drew would find himself on the rear of the Lindberg-driven high-class racing car and would get through into third place. Lindberg would ultimately finish 4th position, ahead of Wolfgang Pyro, Mattis Jakobsen and Pierre Caffer in the M Racing car. In 6th place, he would remain in 6th, but he was also closing in on Danny Soufi. He was just over a lap down on the race-leading car, and that would become quite a compelling battle, as it were, on the track. A phantom battle between the car in last and the car in first. This was the moment that Pierre Caffer unlapped himself, got through, remaining in 6th position, but at least getting himself onto the lead lap. Alas, it was to be short-lived, because just 2 corners later, he would just put a wheel wrong going into turn 3. The rear end would let go. Danny Soufi did a good job of avoiding. Pierre Caffer would rejoin the race, as you can see here. However, a slight error, perhaps a slightly dented ego for Pierre after that error. Soufi then was left clear at the front of the order to cruise home to a race victory, and he would do so at the front. Equally, Lawrence Herr, while he was seeing David Drew close in slightly from 3rd place, it wasn't to be a result for him. It was a checkered flag, though, for Danny Soufi. Soufi and Conrad Motorsport back in the Prototype Winter Series, and the reigning Drivers' Champion from 2024 has started 2025 firmly on the right foot. Pulling into the pit lane, and would receive warm embrace from his team boss, Franz Conrad, and his colleagues at Conrad Motorsport. A really good start to the season for Soufi, who eventually won the race by 10.8 seconds. Lawrence Herr showed his pace and closed in massively towards the end. David Drew of CLX Motorsport in 3rd position. Philip Lindberg 30 seconds back from them in 4th overall. Racing experiences, Matthias Bier Jakobsen in 5th and Pierre Caffer rounding out the order in 6th. As you can see, the GTWinterSeries cars are heading out onto the circuit, but now it's time to celebrate on the podium with the drivers of the Prototype Winter Series.
So we are good to go with the podium for the Prototype Winter Series then. We will start with our 3rd placed drivers for CLX Motorsport. It is Quentin Joseph and David Drew. Sorry, David. How could I forget about David Drew after a fantastic performance in the second half of the race? In 2nd position, we have the pairing of John Brownson and Lawrence Herr. Congratulations, guys, onto the 2nd step of the podium. But ultimately, the race victory went in fairly convincing fashion to Conrad Motorsport and Danny Soufi. Danny gets a great reception from the crowd down below the podium. The trophies ready to be presented. The 2nd and 3rd place trophies by Bruno and Mario from our champagne providers, Quinta-Arcas, and the winning trophy by Jan from GEDLICH Racing. Another big round of applause. The drivers will pose now for the photographs. The photographers make their way out onto the podium then. And after a very exciting first race of the weekend for the Prototype Winter Series, we look forward now to race 2 to come tomorrow afternoon, perhaps in very different conditions, a different running order of drivers than what we had here today. It's going to be an enthralling race. We're just going to wait for the photographs to be done, and down off the podium. Then we'll speak to David quickly before he disappears downstairs. David, it was an exciting second half of the race for you, wasn't it? The pit stop really mixes those races around.
Yeah, for sure. You need to be quite sharp on the restart of with the time loop. So it was quite interesting. I think we did quite a good race. We wanted to be on the podium at the end of the race, so I think we achieved the first goal of the weekend, and now let's go on for the second race of the weekend.
Are you a driver who is excited about some rain tomorrow or not?
Yeah, I love rain. So, but drive was nice too. So anything is good.
Excellent. Thank you, David, for stopping by for a quick chat. Right, we'll let the drivers go, and we will look forward now to our final bit of racing here this afternoon at Estoril. It is the GT Winter Series up next.
So the GT Win Series cars heading out on to the circuit now. These are the big guns, the big burly GT cars that really put a rumble through your chest. Some of the fastest supercars in the racing world today. We've got a hearty mix of single mate cars from the likes of Ferrari Challenge, Lamborghini Super Trofeo, Porsche Carrera Cup, et al., and GT3s up there at the sharp end. The sharp end, I believe, is where we'll find Izzy Browning.
That is indeed where you will find me. Last race of the day. Can't quite believe it's gone so quickly. But of course, we've got lots more racing coming up tomorrow. We are on the grid for the first GT Winter Series race of the weekend. As Adam's already said, plenty of classes in this race. So plenty of cars for us to go and have a look at. And that's something I'm quite keen to do, just to give you a little bit of a look down the grid. But one thing I will say, just quickly, Johnny, if we spin round, should have done this really at the beginning, but you've stuck around, so it's okay. To give you a little look down to the turn one. We've got the safety car just heading off on that lap now. But yeah, a little bit of a look down to turn one. We will try and do that most of the tracks that we go to, just to give you a bit of an idea of what the drivers will see going down to turn one. So we have got on the pole position Jerzy Spinkovic. Now that's the unique racing car. This is a Cup 4 Lamborghini car. He has got, well, a champion in Clio Cup, but has spent a lot of time with this team, and 1 year of Lamborghini Super Trofeo racing under his belt. So the door's still open, so I'm going to dive in. Jerzy, great to see you. Welcome to the Winter Series. How are you feeling? You're on pole position for the first race.
Yeah, the quali was quite good. Yeah, now the race will be difficult for sure with the GT3 cars. Yeah, so we will see how the race goes.
And do you like Estoril as a circuit?
Yeah, it's pretty fun to drive, the difficult corners, and yeah, I enjoy it.
Well, we wish you the very best of luck, and have a good race.
Thanks.
All right, we will move on. We've got the number 54 alongside, that is Dexter Muller in the car. Now, this is the first of our GT3 cars, of course, as I said, different classes, and I'll just quickly run you through those classes so that you are up to date. So we've got the GT3 cars, we've got the Cup 1 Ferrari Challenge cars, those are the 296 cars, the Cup 2 Porsche 992s, which we'll see further down the grid. I've got a bit of time, so I'm going to try and get down there to let you see those cars. We've also got the Cup 4 Lamborghini Super Trofeos, as I said, and the Cup 5, the Ferrari 488 as well. I think I've got all of them. Adam will tell me if I missed one or two, but we are going to continue down the grid. The number 1 car that you can see here, the SR Motorsport by Schnitzlau, is Kenneth Heyer. Now, he is the reigning GT Winter Series champion, of course, with Jamo Hartling. Jamo in the GT4 Winter Series with Enrico Federer this year. But Kenneth back on the grid and with a new partner this year in Moritz Viskerschen. Kenneth, great to see you, reigning champ, and you're in a good position, but I'm sure you'll be wanting to get up there and take the win today, won't you?
Yeah, the plan in the quali was not to qualify on P3 for sure. Yeah, it's a long series. We are all races here in the series, so we have to be also a bit clever in the races. So let's see of the speed of the Lamborghini, especially at the start, with the more power. But yeah, afterwards I want to be 1 or 2, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. I mean, you are here for the full season, so playing it a little bit clever, as you said. But for Estoril, I mean, a circuit that you're used to now, because you're a veteran in the GT Winter Series. We see you come back time and time again, which we're always grateful to see you on our grid. And what do you think about your chances in the Mercedes versus the Lambo? You kind of touched on it a little bit there, but what are you thinking?
Well, it's a bit of tricky in the gamble at the start. I think at the start for sure follow the first place. On third, it's quite good from the line compared to Dexter and the Mercedes. But also the left Lamborghini will have advantage until the first corner, and afterwards, I think then with the GT3 we will see. It's a good gamble.
All right, well, I'm looking forward to it. Good luck. Have a good race. Oh, Kenneth, always fantastic. And always a great person to talk to because he's really great at explaining things to you, the viewers. I remember last year him telling me the difference between the spray in the Formula Winter Series cars and the GTs. He was saying, oh, well, the Formulas, they swim, don't they? Which I thought was a fantastic way to describe it. So coming back onto the grid, we've got the first of our Cup 1 cars, the Ferrari, the AF Corsa of Andreas Berg Sorensen in that car, and we are going to have to clear off the grid very quickly, but as I said, the first of the 992s is right there, and we're going to get on with this race.
Well then, if you put a weapon to my cranium and told me what's GT racing, it's just this. Very contrasting cars, ready to go racing. Jerzy Spinkovics is on pole position with Dexter Muller alongside him, a Super Trofeo Spec Cup 4 car alongside a GT3. That's followed by another GT3, Kenneth Heyer in the SR Motorsport by Schnitzelau Machine. He is alongside Severin Mazur, the team boss, the man in charge of GT3 Poland. GT3 Poland won the first race of the year in 2024. Andreas Bock Sorensen in 5th position alongside Alfredo Hernandez, a Cup 1 Ferrari alongside another GT3 Mercedes. Cristiano Maciel having a good run as well in the other AF Corsa entered Ferrari 296. Leandro Martins is next. He's the first of the Cup 2 runners, the Porsche Carrera Cup cars. Mans Thalin, a graduate of the Swedish Touring Car Championship, joining him on, or rather joining Joachim Bolting on the 5th row of the grid. Bolting in his 2nd race of the day. Alvaro Ramos is next in our 3rd and final Ferrari 296. He is alongside PTT Racing's Przemysław Bienkowski, of course a regular from 2024. Great to see him back. Alex Biatovic is next. He is in an Autosport Racing Lamborghini Huracan Super Trofeo car. And Oscar Rindzovic is concluding the order, the Scottish-based driver sitting in 14th on the grid. And I think an Englishman by birth, Scotsman currently, and has lived in various places. Quite the background on Oscar. He is making his racing debut here today, having previously done track days. I thought he'd done quite a lot of track days, but he revealed to me that he's probably spent more time on track in the last 72 hours than he has at any time in his life previous. So Oscar Rindzovic is going through something of a baptism of fire here, but he is on the pace, to be fair. He is up there and showing himself nicely in Cup 5 for the older Ferrari Challenge cars. That class established last minute to try and encourage some of the 488 Challenge Evos into the GT Winter Series. Incidentally, if you're looking at the GT Winter Series website and you think, that's not really a class for my car, we'll find a way. If it's a GT, we will find a class for you eventually. We are getting ourselves prepared for what will be a very exciting 30-minute race in the GT Winter Series. Thousands of brake horsepower about to be unleashed. V8s, V10s, and a few V6s and straight 6s as well on the circuit. We're underway. eyes as they all get underway. And look at that. It is one of the Ferraris to the fore there. The 76 car right up there at the front. AF Corsa leading the way into the first corner. Jerzy Spinkovic in second position. But what a start there from Andreas Bog Sorensen as we have a spin for Przemysław Bienkowski towards the back of the field, but it's Sorensen that leads the way. I didn't think it would be a Ferrari at the front, out of turn one at least, but the 296 challenge car leads, and unfortunately we've got a Porsche pointed the wrong way.
No, you're right. Ferrari leading after turn one was not on my bingo card either, so that was a very impressive start indeed. You really would have put your money, wouldn't you, on the Lamborghinis, because they are generally very good in a straight line, but just better reactions maybe for Sorensen, and that puts the Ferrari out in front. Lamborghini second and third, Mercedes AMG fourth and fifth, and then the best of the Porsches in sixth position as they head out of turn 6 downhill towards turn number 7. And well, already, Adam, we were rubbing our hands with glee at the prospect of what was going to be a bit of an interesting race. Now we've muddled up the order even further. I really don't know what to predict next. This is not the order we expected after lap 1. Well down in 6th position is Kenneth Heyer in the number 1 Mercedes, not even the highest placed of the AMGs anymore. We've got a race on our hands here.
Yes, we do. Now, theoretically, of course, those GT3 cars are quicker. They are quicker across a lap with the same driver in the car, for sure. But the drivers have a role to play, and of course Estoril, with that long run towards the first braking zone, allows the 296 and the Lamborghinis to go forward. But here comes Dexter Muller. He had the run out of Parabolica Ayrton Senna, but then the superior straight line speed, clocking in just under 20 kilometers an hour faster in practice. Those Lamborghini Super Trofeo cars, as we see here, side-by-side action. Alfredo Hernandez getting to the inside there of Manstalin, the young 16-year-old driver with some wisdom beyond his years there, just allowing Alfredo to take the corner since he was off track.
Yeah, already then we're seeing the variances in speed and where the different cars are generating their lap time. The Lamborghinis very quick down the main straight, and that means a gap that looks virtually unassailable going onto the main straight is down to almost nothing heading into the braking zone at turn 1, and that's going to make life very difficult for Sorensen out in front to sort of predict how and when to defend. He might go onto the straight, even be halfway down it, thinking, yeah, I don't really need to cover the inside line here, and then suddenly a ballistic missile appears behind him in the shape of Jerzy Spinkovic's Lamborghini, and suddenly he's got a battle on his hands. The two Mercedes AMGs together here in 4th and 5th as well, so Dexter Muller and Kenneth Heyer together. Heyer will really want to try and get through here because this is a car that he doesn't have a natural performance advantage over anywhere, and he wants to reassert his authority as the top Mercedes AMG in the race. He's right behind Dexter Muller now, heading into the final few turns, and will no doubt be setting up ideally here for a move into turn 1.
He absolutely will. Now, Dexter Muller, very experienced at the wheel of this Mercedes AMG GT3. He first drove one back in 2019 as we continue to watch Bug Sorensen leading the way in the Ferrari 296. But the point I was going to make previously, Dexter Muller. Oh, here comes Jerzy. Never mind my point, because there goes Jerzy Spinkovic. The unique racing car goes to the front of the order. Jerzy, braver on the brakes there. Clio Cup race winner in Europe, Clio Cup champion in the Middle East. He knows his racecraft, and he's through into the lead. And if you're Kenneth Heyer right now, you're going to be going, oh gosh, there's so many cars between me and the leader, but the leader is so agonizingly close in the big picture in terms of gap from 1st to 5th. The top 5 driving away. The question now is, how long is Andreas Berg Sorensen going to stay in 2nd place? Because I don't think he's got anything to offer up against Jerzy Spinkovic. Now, Jerzy, with a year of experience in Lamborghini Super Trofeo, Servin Masseur has driven a Lamborghini Super Trofeo car for longer, but hasn't really raced at the same high echelons as Jerzy Spinkovic. So this could be quite an interesting one if the Lamborghini can get through. And then we've got this GT3 battle, uncharacteristically not for any position on the overall podium. And while Dexter Muller, yes, has driven a Mercedes AMG GT3 for several years, Kenneth Heyer pretty much developed the thing. He was a big part of the development of the car he's currently driving, has been a part of the Mercedes AMG customer racing family since 2010. late 2010 when you started to see the Mercedes SLS at events like VLN, and then 2011 when it finally came on song for customers. But what we are seeing is those GT3 cars make up so much time through Parabolica Ayrton Senna. Dexter Muller, in the last couple of corners, makes a good second or so on the Lamborghini, but then the Lamborghini just shifts away down the straight.
Maybe a bit of damage to the front of Dexter Muller's car. Not a lot, but I think one of the dive planes maybe on the right front corner have been knocked slightly loose. Won't be affecting him too much. You can just see it sticking out next to the Pirelli sticker on the right front corner of the first of the Mercedes. Worth reminding everyone as well that these two Mercedes, they're not fighting for overall podium places at the moment, but they are the first two GT3 class cars, so they are fighting for a class win. And as far as points are concerned, that is the key. You score points within your class, so you can be 7th in the overall running order, but if you're the highest placed car in your class, you will take the maximum points. They've tweaked the point system slightly for this year so that the more cars there are in your class, the more points are available for doing well in it. Well, we've got 3 GT3 class cars entered this weekend, so a reasonable amount of points on offer for whichever of those two cars, or potentially the BDR competition by Grupo car number 77, the other Mercedes AMG, whichever of those finishes at the top will take the maximum points. But for all the aggression we saw really earlier on for Kenneth Heyer, he now seems to have almost settled in a little bit behind Dexter Muller, still only a car length or so behind, but not harrying him in quite the way he was.
Yeah, Dexter was talking to me earlier on today and kind of, I don't know about reveling, but certainly seeming very interested in how the weekend was going to go for him, because very scarcely in his racing career has he been responsible for all of the driving on a weekend. Typically, he has been sharing, of course, with Yannick Mettler very successfully in GT Open and the Michelin Le Mans Cup. But here he is driving solo in all 3 races this weekend, and he's going to be driving this race, I think, with significant pressure from Kenneth Heyer. Meanwhile, second in Cup 2 under contest, and in fact, Man Stalling has just gotten past Joachim Bolting for 8th overall and second in class. Ooh. Meanwhile, second in the Ferrari Challenge class, the Cup 1 category, Alvaro Ramos there, rather forcefully placing his car ahead of Cristiano Maciel. A very interesting fight between them. I believe both drivers are Portuguese, although Cristiano did struggle to find much information on him. But Jerzy Spinkovic is slowing. What's going on there with the Lamborghini? It's now down to second place. Jerzy Spinkovic there lost a lot of time, and it's very difficult to really ascertain why.
It's gearbox. I think it's gearbox,
yes.
Because I noticed going at the end of the previous lap, the gap suddenly came down, but going into the last corner, it looked like it was going out. I think he's struggling, maybe second to third, third to fourth, maybe hard to tell, but I think he's got a gear issue, and that is why he's off the pace. So Jerzy Spinkovic looked like he was pulling away out in front, managing the race well, but I think it's a gearbox or a clutch issue, something like that. It affected him right at the end of the previous lap, and now clearly the problem's getting worse.
I think he might be stuck in like 4th gear or something like that, or 3rd, because you could see the car visibly jolting on the rev limiter coming out of Parabolica Interior. We'll see if he comes in. I don't think that car is long for this race. Indeed, Jerzy Spinkovic, he looked like he was on his way to starting the season in the best way possible, is now heading into the pits with what looks an awful lot like something in the gearbox or the clutch. And so we have a battle for 1st and 2nd, a battle for 3rd and 4th. Andreas Bugge Sørensen, who is only really a few races into his career, did some Ferrari Challenge last year, but overall is still very new to motor racing. He's not going to believe his luck. He's got a second bite of the cherry as the race leader, but Severin Mazur almost taking a bite out of his rear quarter panel there.
What a roller coaster first 9 minutes of the race this has been for Sørensen. He started on the second row, probably thinking, right, let's just stay out of trouble into turn 1, not do anything silly. Finds himself leading after turn 1, then lost the lead, then re-inherits again, and now he's got Mazur, well, I was going to say right behind, but the Ferrari does seem a bit better through the twisty stuff, doesn't it? So the gap will come down on the main straight, then extend slightly. It's not necessarily good news for Mazur, that, though. It means he's realistically got 1 opportunity per lap to try and make the move. Right, there is a Unique Racing mechanic staring into the back of the erstwhile race-leading Lamborghini. And now that same mechanic, I'm afraid, is leaning into the car, I fear, to give the message to Jerzy Spinkovic that his race may be done. It was an exciting 9 minutes of racing for Stvinkovic, but he would have liked that excitement to continue for another 20 minutes or so. And yeah, quite clearly is something in the gearbox. The car you can see is in neutral at the moment, so they're not attempting to change gear at the moment, but they're obviously still trying to identify the issue. As on track, Adam, the race very much continues.
Very much continues. Kenneth Heyer right there behind Dexter Muller. Isn't going to be close enough for a move into the first corner. Ditto Severin Mazur and Andreas Bug Sorensen. But what a treat this race is. The differing cars, the differing driver levels, creating a very interesting scrap. The GT3 cars are faster if you can be right on that edge that gains them the time. But what we're seeing right now is the Mercedes being stuck behind those cars in the twisties. Here's the battle for second in Cup 1, but I've got to be honest, I want to see the race lead battle, because that was looking very close out of Lamy. Here they are, the top four heading towards Parabolica Interior. Looked to me like Severin Mazur there was a bit on the curves going into turn 6 and just about got the car stopped. Dexter Muller, meanwhile, doesn't really know what to do, because in some corners he's right on the back of the Lamborghini. In other corners, he's under immense scrutiny from Kenneth Heyer.
You do get the sense, don't you, that Sorensen is in the lead, but is probably using almost all of his skill to remain there. That car is on the limit at the moment, and Severin Mazur is sort of just trying to force him into a mistake, really. I'd be interested to see the relative top speed between the Ferrari and the Lamborghini down the straights. We know the Lamborghini has an edge over the full GT3 spec cars, but this Cup 1 Ferrari, is it going to have the legs in a straight line? It looked to me like Mazur was later on the brakes into turn 1 last time. Suggests the Ferrari maybe has a bit of an edge in a straight line. Look at this, though. We are only a couple of minutes from halfway, and the top 4 cars are in the same shot as they cross the line, all doing very different speeds down into the first corner. Here comes the late-braking Lamborghini, and Severin Mazur goes to the inside line, gets to the apex first, and becomes the third different leader of the race. There's then side-to-side contact between Sorensen and Muller. Sorensen, I think, will hang on to second for now, but that was a key pass, you feel, for Sorensen. He now needs to get his head down and get away from this brawl for second place.
Yeah, Severin Mazur then leads the way just over a dozen minutes into the race, and now for Dexter Muller the question mark is the car okay? And then after that it's, well, how do I get past this, I must say, rather splendidly liveried Ferrari 296 challenge car. It does look to me as though Dexter's car might not be quite at full song now. It's hard to say because, of course, yes, the Ferrari is so much quicker in a straight line. Looked like it was four-wheel drifting away from the apex there. As you said, Andreas Bug Sorensen really is putting in a mighty shift to try and stay in these overall podium positions, comfortably leading Cup 1, but I guarantee you that's not even a thought in his mind right now. Benny Simonson is his driver coach for this weekend, was at one time listed on the entry list as well, but I note he's not currently listed to take the car over in race 3, so I think Andreas might be driving solo all weekend. Either way, his countryman, the fellow Dane, is tutoring him through this. He went wide there through turn 12. Of course, turn 13, the GT3s are so much quicker through the apex, but Dexter Muller's momentum stalled out there because the Ferrari was just there in his way. What a scrap.
It's all well and good having mid-corner speed, but you can't physically drive through a car that is going slower than you at the apex. That's really delayed Dexter Muller's exit from the corner and now leaves him vulnerable to attack from Kenneth Heyer. And remember, these two are fighting for the lead in the GT3 class, so from a championship perspective, I know it's only round 1, but it is still worth thinking about the points. That really is the fight that is of more importance to Dexter Muller. On the other hand, though, if he gets past the Ferrari and Kenneth Heyer doesn't, that's a big advantage in his quest to claim the GT3 class victory. So there is definitely a reward here up for grabs if he can get through. It's just a case of how much of a risk is he willing to take. He has a good run out of turn number 4. Through the kink, though, the Ferrari will stretch its legs, and as long as Sorensen, I should say, hits the brakes at the right time into the hairpin, which I think he has managed to do, he should come out the other side still in second position. But what a fight he's got on his hands to keep it.
And meanwhile, Severin Mazur has disappeared up the road. Just set his personal best lap of the race at 1:39.147. Now that he's in clear air, he is vanishing away from the leading Ferrari. Third and fourth position, though, or rather the former leading Ferrari, of course, and now the second place car with the two Mercedes behind. Really interesting scrap, as we've alluded to. That raw straight line speed of the 296 Challenge car puts him into an early lead and has now put him into what I think is actually quite an unenviable position, because he hasn't had a moment of peace in this race.
But again there, the third place man Dexter Muller just impeded mid-corner by the Ferrari, and you do feel at some point Kenneth Heyer is going to try and have a stab up the inside into turn one. He's close enough to at least think about it lap after lap, but hasn't yet made that decisive jink to the inside line. But yeah, difficult position this for the GT3 class leader to be in, having his own battle for class victory, but very much being affected by a car from another class ahead of him. Further back, still some good scrapping to be had. This is the 6th place group, I believe, isn't it? In fact, we've had a change at the front of this group on the previous lap. Up into 5th place has gone the 911 Porsche of Leandro Martins, and up ahead then of that car, the number 77, the bronze, black and red Mercedes AMG, the number 77 of Alfredo Hernandez, who is the third of the GT3 spec cars in the race, just losing a place overall, but again, doesn't affect his points haul from the race. As long as he reaches the checkered flag, he's guaranteed at least a class podium. But there is something nice to be said, isn't there? Even if you're not necessarily in contention for a class win, you're probably going to have someone to play with out there.
Absolutely the case, and of course Leandro Martins, one of the very top drivers in last year's GT Winter Series, runner-up in the 2024 championship overall, but also winning 2 championships across his summer in 2024, the Spanish GT Championship and the AM class of GT Cup Open Europe in a Porsche, both in a Porsche 992 GT3 Cup car. So a very, very well decorated driver in recent times, but Dexter Muller has gotten past Andreas Bugh Sorensen. It's finally happened somewhere in the twisties there, I think, at the end of the lap. And now Andreas is under pressure from Kenneth Heyer, and I assure you, Kenneth is going to take liberties here because he needs to get through now. He desperately wants to contest Dexter for that GT3 win.
Yeah, that's significant. We don't know how he did it, but Dexter getting the move made in a place that Kenneth couldn't go with him could be race-defining as far as the GT3 class is concerned. Still, Kenneth Heyer can't find a way through the Ferrari's defences, and as they head up out of turn number 4, this, of course, is where the Cup 1 class Ferrari will stretch its legs and pull a bit of a margin, but Kenneth Heyer will have seen where Dexter Muller made that move, which sadly we didn't, and he'll try and do the same thing, not for the first time. The Ferrari is way wide of the apex at turn 6, but then gets the power down on the exit, and I'm not convinced that that will actually allow Kenneth Heyer to wriggle up the inside. No, it didn't, so well, that's saying something, isn't it? You've got that much power at your disposal that you can be in a different postcode to the apex of the corner and still hold on to the place.
Somewhere in the region of 700 horses under that Ferrari 296 engine canopy is Kenneth Heyer. That's a little speculative nose to the inside at the Gancho chicane. Now, Kenneth Heyer will be, as you said, so eager to get past to try and hold on to a chance of a GT3 win. Andreas Bugh Sorensen not giving him the inside, though. He has no reason to in this battle for overall honours, of course. Now, critically, Dexter Muller was quicker in qualifying, lest we forget, than Severin Mazur. The gap is 3.5 seconds. There are 11.5 minutes left. It was only fractionally faster for Dexter Muller in quali, but there is a chance now that Dexter can go Lamborghini hunting.
Well, on the previous lap, though, 6/10 slower than the race leader, but yeah, I would have expected maybe for him to be able to stitch together slightly a better lap than that. It was his personal best. The trouble is that the race leader, Severin Mazur, also posted his personal best lap of the race so far. It's an outright fastest first sector for Muller, though, as he maybe now starts to get into his groove. It's the first time, really, that he's had fully clean air ahead of him in this race, and he intends to utilise that, I am sure. Right, can the Ferrari of the third-placed man, Sorensen, hold on to the apex this time? Well, there's your answer. No, not really. But then sort of hooks up a late apex, carries good speed up the hill, and still retains a decent margin before they hit the brakes into turn 7. So that is going to be the frustration here for Kenneth Heyer. He's quicker, no doubt about it. If he had fully clean air, I think he could get away from Sorensen, but it's making the move. Is he quick in the right bits of the track to find a way through? At the moment, the answer appears to be no.
Yeah, really interesting scrap this between two drivers of vastly differing experience in vastly differing racing cars. Of course, Kenneth Heyer from a racing family, his father, one of the most famed names of a German racing. Goodness me. Now the Ferrari will blast off again after that very close moment coming out of the final corner. Of course, Kenneth Heyer, as Dexter Muller goes fastest of all, son of Hans Heyer, as I was going to allude to previously. You might know him for his European Championship wins in touring cars, or famously not qualifying, getting disqualified from and not finishing the 1977 German Grand Prix. Nonetheless, a great scrap for third overall here, and as we saw with that graphic regarding Dexter Muller, we may yet have a battle on for the win as well. 3.2 seconds the gap there. Dexter will have to hustle, but he can if he needs to in that Carbahn Raceworks by SPS Mercedes. He'd love to get some silverware in what I believe is his first ever solo race. That would mean a lot to him. Severin Mazur, though, in at the lead in a car he knows very well, the GT3 Poland Lamborghini. And if he's anything like me, that being a bit of a numbers geek, he would love to win the first race of the season in a GT3 Poland Lamborghini, as we saw 12 months ago.
Indeed so. History has a tendency sometimes to repeat itself, doesn't it? The problem is that he has sort of plateaued now. His pace is very consistent, but he's no longer going any quicker than he was before, whereas Dexter Muller, with every lap in clean air that he puts in, is finding a bit more performance. He was quickest of anybody in Sector 1 on this lap. However, Mazur just did a outright fastest middle sector, so it's sort of balancing out slightly. This battle continues to rage on. Kenneth Heyer is closer than ever at the final corner. He is giving a helping hand to Andreas Bog-Sorensen. Well, it was a pass. It was a bit of a braille pass. It might come to nothing, though, because the Ferrari, we know, is going to have the extra speed in a straight line, and back through he will go. Can Kenneth Heyer outbrake him into turn one? He may, of course, elect not to, knowing that he did make that move initially with a slightly more aggressive manner than he would have planned, and indeed he does settle back in behind the Ferrari, but that was rather close.
Oh, I love the GT Winter Series. What an action this is. Here comes Kenneth Heyer, this time definitively with the inside line. He moves up to third place. I do wonder if anything's going to be said about how he initially got into third place. Second time was the charm, and it was executed nicely. But let's see now if Andreas Bog-Sorensen maybe wants to try and retaliate again, because here comes the Ferrari strong suit, a straight line. He's got the unfavoured outside line. He's struggled to get this car stopped for parabolic interior many times. He's really trying, wrestling that car for all it's worth. His objective now is to find grip he's hitherto not discovered in this Ferrari 296 Challenge car to just maybe be close enough to get there down the straight again and reclaim that third position. But I think by the time he's through that long turn 13, that will be a long shot.
I suspect you might be right, because that really seems to be where Heyer has been taking chunks of time out of him, although the gap is not enormous as we head towards that section. So Kenneth Heyer driving a bit defensively maybe there into the left-hander. Isn't going to be as far ahead of the Ferrari as he would like to be, but I suspect he should be okay. Look at the gap double through one corner. That is where the GT3 spec cars have the advantage, no doubt about it. And I think that maybe now Andreas Bog-Sorensen will have to settle for fourth position, but he has played a very entertaining part in this race, that is for sure. This has been a great advert, I think, really, for multi-class GT racing. GT3 in particular has always been about balancing the performance of the cars so that they are all as equal as possible, and that's great. It's got its benefits, definitely. But this has been a real old-school kind of race, hasn't it? Those David versus Goliath battles, cars with more straight-line speed versus cars with lots more grip, and it has been massively entertaining.
The Shell Ferrari has been Schnell during this race, but it is going to have to settle for a step off the overall podium by the looks of it. Meanwhile, fifth overall under contest as Leandro Martins, who has, of course, already gotten past at one point Alfredo Hernandez, is now once again under pressure from the car that sits third in GT3. Two drivers whom we saw last year. Hernandez, though, in previous years, running his Super Trofeo Lamborghini, getting to the inside there almost, Leandro Martins. But again, the comparatively light downforce of the Porsche, allowing it to scuttle away in a straight. Of course, the Porsche not as strong in a straight line versus the Ferraris and the Lamborghini single-make cars. The Porsche is a lot more of a handling car, but of course it does also have a lot less downforce than a GT3. So it is, again, a compelling scrap between them. Alfredo Hernandez would like to get a top 5 finish out of this in his golden Mercedes and Grupo Prom Gold. The Grupo Prom by BDR competition entry. He is familiar with this GT3 car. He did run it in some Ultimate Cup Series rounds last year in the GT Sprint Cup Series. But he's certainly more familiar with his Lamborghini over the last several years. Taking to this Mercedes fairly well, and I think again for him it's as much about competing as it is learning. But again, all of that learning stuff, I'm just here to study the car and figure out how it works, goes out of the window as soon as you have another car in front of you.
Well, indeed, so. I mean, we've seen that very much with the lead group. In theory, because they were almost all in different classes, they didn't really need to fight each other. But, you know, you tell that to a racing driver who's in the middle of a four-way fight for the race lead, and they're probably going to have a go, aren't they? Things settling down a bit now, though. 4 minutes to go. The lead gap's static at around 4 seconds. Oops, who is that? It's the 32 car, that is. Yeah, so Beatovic, who was running towards the back. I very briefly saw a Lamborghini pointing the wrong way and panicked for a second, but no, it's not the race-leading GT3 Poland car. That is Alex Beatovic, who was down in 13th position overall. That was, what, third in class, I believe, at the time of... second in class at the time of that rotation at the Parabolica Interior, turn number 6. Kenneth Hire, by the way, has been warned for driving standards, but not penalised. So that was a little smack on the back of the wrist. Don't do it again. Okay, he says, I don't really need to now because I'm into third position. I'm not likely to catch Dexter Muller. So, okay, he'll take that little telling off rather than a full-blown punishment, I suspect. The gap for reference between he and Dexter Muller is hovering at around 7 seconds or so. So with 3 minutes to go, barring any late dramas, our podium pretty much set, at least overall. There are still some good battles going on behind, in particular for 5th position. The Racar Racing Porsche, number 911, still has that BDR competition Mercedes behind. They are less than a second apart. They're in different classes, but that now remains our closest battle on track.
Another good battle in 8th and 9th as well between the number 50 AF Corsa Ferrari of Cristiano Maciel and Joachim Bulting. You can see them just in the background of that shot there, the red Ferrari and the blue Porsche, running in separate classes, of course, but having a good scrap. I also want to shout out the driver of the number 80 Myrtle Motorsport car, Oscar Rintovic, in his first race, lest we forget, and his by far most track experience of his life has come in the last 72 hours. He's running in 11th place. He's running ahead of Biankowski, who of course we saw last year in the GT Win Series on a regular basis. Alex Beatovic, who has racing experience as well, and in general holding himself to a very strong standard in his first weekend of action. That is by no means a small feat. He's almost in the top 10. He's only a few seconds behind the car in 10th place, which is a newer spec Ferrari challenge machine. There is the number 80 Myrtle Motorsport car running very well in 11th position on his first race weekend. Just behind him, though, to start what should be the penultimate lap of the race, is Severin Mazur, who is putting in the best performance of all at the front of the field in what was and continues to be a roller coaster opener to the GT Winter Series of 2025.
Yeah, you promised us a great race, Adam, and I have to say the drivers of the GT Winter Series have very much delivered that. That was particularly the first half of the race, absolutely enthralling stuff, chopping and changing of positions, and as we said, the differing performance levels of the cars really what made that. There was some discussion at the start of the day about how exactly that was going to play out between the particularly the Lamborghini Super Trofeo cars really and the GT3 cars. Not many people really were talking about the Cup 1 class Ferrari, and yet that injected itself straight into the thick of battle with that phenomenal start from Andreas Bog Sorensen putting him out in front. Kenneth Hire, off the pace, would you say?
It looked a little bit slow, didn't it? I think he has some issues maybe at the front suspension, because it looks like it's struggling for grip, and I thought maybe it looked a bit excessively cambered at the front as well. But Let's see what's going on with Kenneth Heyer, because that could be Andreas Bog Sorensen getting his podium after all, for one thing. And it could also be despair, of course, for the driver who was one half of the championship winning squad last year in the GTWinterSeries. Kenneth Heyer wears the number 1 because he's defending his championship, and this would be a terrible start for him.
Dropped 2.5 seconds to the cars ahead in the middle sector alone, and here he is, look, touring, I'd say, through the final corner, and this is Kenneth Heyer about to lose third position. Blasting back around the outside goes the relentless Andreas Bog Sorensen, who has never given up in this race. He's been handed positions a couple of times through other people's mechanical misfortune, but he will take it. He's into third, and Kenneth Heyer's 2025 GTWinterSeries campaign is going to begin with a non-finish. I'm not even convinced the car's got the power to get into the pit lane. It might just crawl out of the way, but that is a car that has lost, I think, all get up and go, and only a lap and a half or so, heartbreakingly, before the flag.
Meanwhile, Severin Mazur is having some trouble with traffic, and Dexter Muller, in his rather foreboding big black Mercedes, seems to be carving through a little bit easier. Oscar Rinzovich gives the inside line to Severin, who's going deep into that corner. He got the car stopped. Kenneth Heyer trundling into the pit lane and will be third, classified third in GT3, so that's not terrible, but it is not the foot we thought he was going to start on. Meanwhile, Severin Mazur, the clock has hit 0. This is the final lap of the race. Dexter Muller is not going to get to the rear of him, but it looked for a minute there as though perhaps a stumbling block had made itself known in the very final moment of this first GTWinterSeries race of the season. However, history has repeated itself, because once again in GTWinterSeries race 1 of the year, as in 2024, it happens again in 2025, GT3 Poland, this time with Severin Mazur at the wheel, claiming the win in the GTWinterSeries opener for 2025. Dexter Muller with a flash of the headlights, a GT3 win, and I suspect a wry smile on his face, because as long as he's having fun, Dexter is all about it, and I'm sure he had a lot of fun there. Andreas Bug Sorensen with an inherited podium, yet a very well-deserved one all the same. Certainly, if there were a Fighting Spirit award, it's going his way. What a mighty effort from Andreas. He comes in third place. Fourth place, eventually, will be Leandro Martins, who just exits the corner now, albeit with Alfredo Hernandez not far behind, but it is fourth all the same for our Cup 2 winner Leandro Martins. Hernandez takes fifth, Cristiano Maciel taking sixth place. I don't know if it's his first weekend of racing. If Andy can hear me, that would be a question to ask on the podium for sure. I don't know how much racing he's done. Mans Thalin in seventh, Joachim Bulting in 8th place. And in 9th place, rounding out the Cup 1 podium, will eventually be Alvaro Ramos, although Alvaro does seem to have gone missing somewhat on this final tour of the circuit, and in fact he was very slow on his middle sector. He's still not crossed the line, so Alvaro Ramos will be classified 9th all the same, because the next car on the order is Kenneth Heyer, who of course is in the pits. But hopefully he does get to see the flag as this race concludes. There is Ramos now, making his way through. And he does so at pace as well, so if there was an issue, it was only momentary. However, we have had some penalties come down the line. Przemysław Biankowski has gotten 5 seconds to track limits. That doesn't really change much. And the Plus Line Racing team car also with 5 seconds applied. So Joachim Bulting, I think, is going to be shuffled down the order slightly. In fact, no, he'll be safe in his 8th position overall, and indeed his 3rd in Cup 2. But all the same, Severin Mazur pulling up to the winner's position, and 2nd overall, winning in GT3, is Dexter Muller. I think all 3 drivers on this overall podium all winners in their respective classes, and I think all of them will feel like winners for the incredible race that they just put in. I think that's Benny Simonsen there giving the big cheer to Andreas Bug Sorensen there for his Cup 1 win, and I think moreover his brilliant performance in the race. And it was indeed a race of brilliant performances, and one which really harks back to what we saw a year ago here in the GT Winter Series. It was the Lewandowski family Lamborghini from GT3 Poland stable that claimed the first win of the season in 2024, and now Severin Mazur has matched the feat in race 1 of 2025. And what a lovely embrace that is there. I'm sure if Dad wasn't a hero before, he sure is now, because that again was a sensational race from Severin Mazur. Cup 4 class win, of course, in addition to the overall standings, and that will be helpful as well long term in the championship should he be in for the full season campaign, which I believe is going to be the case. And Cup 4 looking very competitive in general this year. Of course, the one driver in particular who's going to feel particularly shortchanged is Jerzy Spinkovic, the early race leader, who came to a halt just a few minutes in with what looked like a gearbox issue. Also, of course, Autosport Racing's 333 car. We haven't mentioned it. We didn't see it at all. That car had an issue in qualifying, had a moment in qualifying, and I think found the barriers at turn 6. And unfortunately, Alessio Ruffini's car did not take the start. Hopefully, we see Alessio again before the end of the weekend. He'll be, in theory, sharing with Milos Pavlovic in the endurance race on Sunday evening. But for now, we are unwinding from a fabulous race. That was our final race of the day, and we certainly left the best for last on Saturday, didn't we? The GT Winter Series delivering in spades. We're going to hear from some of our paddock shortly, I'm sure, and in addition, we will get a podium ceremony, of course, and we'll conclude the day with some analysis too. But of the racing action today, I don't think there's a contest. The GT Winter Series really putting us on the edge of our seats. It's the 6th season of GEDLICH's flagship Winter Series contest, and that is why it's always really going to be my favorite. Just incredible racing between multiple different disciplines of GT racing car. Some strong on that long straight, others quick in the twisties, and a brilliant recipe that it was. I understand that Izzy Browning has ended up with Dexter Muller. That's going to be a fun interview. Over to you.
I have indeed, down with our P2, Dexter Muller. Dexter, quite the race out there. Just talk us through your race.
Yeah, it was a really exciting one. I thought I had a good start, but obviously some people had to jump on me at the start. But I made some ground back, had a little bit of paint trading and stuff, but all in all, it was quite a good race. I'm happy we finished P2. So
and your first time in the Winter Series this weekend. Obviously, we welcome you onto the grid. How have you found everything so far and around Estoril?
Yeah, it's my first time here. Thank you for having me. It's a big pleasure. Yeah, it's something new for me. I've done some other series before, but I love it here in Estoril. It's a historic track for me. So, and now hopefully another one. So.
Yeah, 2 more races tomorrow. So what's possible tomorrow, and how are you feeling? How's the confidence going into tomorrow now?
Yeah, I'm a bit more confident now. I've had the first race start, so that helps quite a bit. But let's see. The competition is pretty tough, and yeah, fingers are crossed. But I think it'll come out right.
Okay, well, a good day. So we'll let you get up to the podium. Congratulations. Thank you very much for speaking to us. We will go up to the podium very shortly, but I think we're going to get some highlights of that race to relive all the action that we've just seen.
And what a job that is, to be the one responsible for highlights cutting for that race, because every moment felt like a highlight in our first GT Winter Series race of the year. So the race got underway, and it was the Cup cars, the single mate cars that dominated. We thought it would be a Lamborghini leading into turn one. Andreas Bog Sorensen had other ideas. A brilliant launch followed by a very audacious run into the first corner. Look at Bog Sorensen. To the inside, to the outside. He knew he'd got a good launch. He wanted to use it, and he claimed the lead over Jerzy Spinkovics into the first turn. Side by side between Severin Mazur and Dexter Muller further back in third position. That battle, of course, would continue on later in the race, but it was the Ferrari leading the way. Andreas Bog Sorensen in the early stages. Przemysław Bienkowski having a spin at turn 2, but he would eventually rejoin the race. He got himself going without issue. There is Bienkowski back underway. Meanwhile, at the front, it was Jerzy Spinkovics leading, and it was a GT3 battle, bizarrely, outside of the overall top 3. Dexter Muller ahead of Kenneth Heyer in a very interesting battle for 4th place. Some great scrapping further back as well among the Ferrari Challenge. The 296s, the fabulous, of course, 296 Challenge cars, which debuted last year in Ferrari Challenge competition. And it was one of those at the front as Jerzy Spinkovics slowed down. Jerzy got back past Andreas Bog Sorensen, led the way, started getting away, and then it seemed as though the car had an issue. And if you watch here, the car at the rear vibrating heavily, seemingly suggesting that it was hitting the rev limiter. We suspect gearbox issues on the 25, stopping Jerzy Spinkovics from claiming a win in his first ever race in the GT Winter Series. The Lamborghini Super Trofeo competitor from last year, unfortunately not getting the start to 2025 that we thought he might have. Again, seeing some stuff here that we didn't see live in the broadcast. Some exciting action between the Ferraris. The number 50 car here, being driven by Cristiano Maciel. He was pressuring Alvaro Ramos. Arroyo Competición running the yellow and red Ferrari, the all-red AF Corsa Ferrari running behind him, as these guys had a good scrap all of their own. Of course, it was all kicking off at the front of the field. Andreas Bog Sorensen was back into the lead, but Severin Mazur got a great run out of the final corner, claimed the lead at turn 1, and then Dexter Muller almost snuck through into second overall. However, there was contact between them, as you saw there. Dexter Muller and Andreas Bog Sorensen meeting in the middle. We did miss a barn burner by the looks of it for second in Cup 1, didn't we? Ramos finally losing out there to Cristiano Maciel in what was a very exciting battle, and it would be Maciel ultimately in second in Cup 1, while of course the class leader was involved in this dispute for overall glory. By this time, Andreas Bog Sorensen in third place, looking to hold off Kenneth Heyer, and Kenneth Heyer would shortly become rather frustrated as he tried to continue moving forward in the order. No such issues for Severin Mazur, however, he did have to put the hammer down because just behind him was Dexter Muller, who at points looked like he might close in and challenge for the win. Ultimately, that would prove not to be the case. Heyer was so much faster through the long corners, and that finally resulted in this moment as Kenneth Heyer just tapped the rear of the Ferrari, then got through at turn 3, having just got past and then losing it on the main straight. He got through into third position definitively, but then the Mercedes would start to slow down. Nightmare for Kenneth Heyer, the defending champion, going past a stricken 32 car there, perhaps not realising that he would soon be stricken in his own right. The Mercedes running in third place. However, his car would trundle to a halt at the end of the race. Just towards the end of the race, and unfortunately, he would not see the checkered flag. Towards the rear of the field, some of the other Cup 4 Lamborghinis were just getting to the flag, but for Kenneth Heyer, he would not achieve the same feat, losing out on third place right at the end of the race. Andreas Bog Sorensen would ultimately finish on the podium after a lion's battle of a race, Brilliant action from Andreas all race long, and as much as Kenneth Hyatt didn't deserve to end his race in the pits, I'd say Andreas maybe deserved that third overall. It was, though, a victory for the number 79. Severin Mazur has taken the win. GT3 Poland, for the second year in a row, starts off the 2025 GTWinterSeries with an overall victory as well as Cup 4 glory. Congratulations also to GT3 winner Dexter Muller, second overall. Cup 1 winner, third overall, Andreas Bug Sorensen, and of course fourth overall, Cup 2 winner Leandro Martins. What a race to kick off the 2025 GT Winter Series. Fun times for sure in the GT Winter Series on that occasion. Here's the order in full. Severin Mazur, if he'd had a few more laps, I think he might have had Dexter Muller behind him directly, but Dexter finishes a close second to win GT3. Andreas Bug Sorensen takes third overall. Fourth position, Leandro Martins. Alfredo Hernandez, second in GT3 and fifth overall. Cristiano Maciel, after a great battle that we saw there in those highlights with Alvaro Ramos, he finishes sixth and second among the Ferraris. Man Stalin in seventh place. Joachim Bolting of Plusline Racing Team in eighth. Alvaro Ramos ninth. Kenneth Hyatt classified 10th, but he will be disappointed with how his race panned out. Oscar Rinzovic in his first race, I should say Rinzovic in his first race, having a good time out there on the track, I'm sure. Premislav Bienkowski in 12th, Bjatovic in 13th, and Jerzy Spinkovic unfortunately ending his race in the pit lane with problems early in the race for the driver who looked like a winner at one stage. Let's now go to the podium, where for the final time today, Andy McEwen has some trophies.
Thank you very much, Adam. Yes, for one last time, we will welcome drivers onto the podium after a spectacular first GT Winter Series race of the season. We're going to start our podium proceedings with the Ferrari 488 Challenge drivers in Cup 5, and we welcome our class winner, Oscar Rinzovic. The Myrtle Motorsport driver climbs onto the top step of the podium. The trophy is here presented by Oleg Karchevsky from Pirelli. A handshake from Oleg, and congratulations to Oscar on a well-deserved win in Cup 5. And he will pose for the photos now for the photographers, and a big crowd down below, many of whom are holding cameras pointed towards the podium, basked in late afternoon sunshine. Congratulations to Oscar Rinzovic, then, the winner in Cup 5. We move on now to Cup 4, which at the start of the race looked like it was going to Jerzy Spinkovic. That did not pan out that way, though, and in the end we welcome only two drivers to the podium. We start with our second place finisher, Alex Bjatovic. Alex heads to the podium, having survived a spin midway through the race and managed to hang on to second place. We've also, I think, already welcomed Severin Mazur onto the podium as well, so we have our top two drivers already celebrating here on the Estoril podium. The trophies then I think we are ready for, more or less, so out will go the trophies, and the winner's trophy once again handed over by Oleg Karchevsky. We have Mario from Quintas-Cascais, our champagne providers for the GT Winter Series, on hand to hand over the second and third place trophies once more. Pictures taken, happy smiling faces on the podium, which is just what we like to see. And once more, give it up for our Cup 4 podium finishers. So a big round of applause for our Cup 4 top two. We now move on to Cup 2, the Porsche Cup 992 category, and we start with our third place driver, Joachim Bolting. It is Joachim's second appearance on the podium today. He was up here for the GT4 race earlier on. In second place in Cup 2, Hans Tallinn. Hans gives the fist bump in celebration. It was a strong second place for him, but in the end, the victory in Cup 2 went the way of Racar Motorsport's Leandro Martins, who gets by far the biggest reception so far. A very popular winner in Cup 2 was Leandro Martins, who was right in the middle of an exciting battle for overall positions as well. Out come the first, second and third place trophies, so we welcome Oleg, Mario and Bruno to the podium to do the honours. handshakes all round, and Leandro Martins gets his 2025 GT Winter Series off to a brilliant start with a victory and maximum points in Cup 2. They pose together for a photo on the top step of the podium and celebrate once more our Cup 2 podium finishers. So off the podium come our Cup 2 top 3 finishers, and another big cheer for Leandro Martins, who I think it's fair to say is very, very pleased with himself after a really well-earned class win. Right, 2 more classes to go. First of all, the Cup 1 division for the Ferrari Challenge 296 cars, and we start with, hopefully, our 3rd place finisher, Alvaro Ramos, who brings with him a young fan of his, by the looks of it, to celebrate on the podium as well. It was, though, an AF Corsa 1-2. In 2nd position, Cristiano Maciel. The Portuguese driver onto the 2nd step of the podium and completing the 1-2 for AF Corsa, having got well and truly in the thick of the action in that race. It's a Cup 1 win for Andreas Berg Sorensen. What a race Andreas had. That was busy, I think is the word I'd use to describe it, as he led the race on 2 occasions overall, and in the end is able to come home a Cup 1 winner. The trophies then head out to the drivers, and well-earned trophies they were as well. A big celebration from Andreas, as you would expect. He really, really had to fight for that fantastic overall result, but also class-winning Cup 1. The photographs are taken. They will eventually gather together at the top of the podium. And a big congratulations to Alvaro, Cristiano and Andreas for their podium finishes in Cup 1. And it'll be interesting to see what we see from those cars tomorrow, particularly that 76 car. Will it be a factor again in the fight for the overall win? So congratulations once again to the Cup 1 podium finishers, Alvaro, Cristiano and Andreas. And we move on now to our final podium of day 1 here from Estoril. It is, of course, for the GT3 class. And in 3rd position, I believe still classified in 3rd, despite not running at the end of the race, we should have Kenneth Heyer. Kenneth comes out onto the podium, understandably a bit disappointed that it's only 3rd. In 2nd position for BDR Competición is Alfredo Hernandez. Congratulations, Alfredo, 2nd position in the GT3 class, but a hard-fought and well-earned victory in GT3 goes to Dexter Muller. Dexter out onto the podium, handshakes with Alfredo and Kenneth, and once again the 3 trophies are brought out. All 3 of those drivers played a part in that race and were well and truly in the middle of what was a phenomenal battle to start our 2025 GT Winter Series. One last photo opportunity for the crowd gathered down below, and the drivers doing their best not to look happy, actually, after what was, I'm sure, a fairly tiring race for our top 3. And they gather together on the podium for one more round of applause for our top 3, Kenneth Heyer, Alfredo Hernandez and Dexter Muller. So that concludes our podium presentation then for the GT Winter Series here at Estoril. The first race of the weekend is complete, and we look forward to more of the same tomorrow.
Well, that concludes our first day of racing, guys. I mean, I think all of us are going to need a little deep breath tonight. That was craziness, but what we expected from the Winter Series. I mean, we'll start with the GT4s, as they were the first race of the day. Andy, Josh Rattigan came in. Of course, we expected him to be fast, you know, coming in as the reigning GT4 European champion. But really announced himself in the Winter Series paddock, didn't he?
Yeah, that's what we call a dominant performance, really. I mean, there are those who will say that circumstances played in his favour. The battle for second early on did give him the chance to pull away, but you can't deny the pace he had. It was relentless. Not really what we expected, actually. We thought it might be tighter, but Josh Rattigan did exactly what he needed to do, made no mistakes, and he's going to be tough to beat if he keeps that pace up.
Absolutely, and someone who, you know, I interviewed him down in Parc Fermé. We've got to talk about Charlie Hart, because first GT4 race, he really impressed today, didn't he, Adam?
Magnificent start to his tenure in GT4 racing. You've got to bear in mind, a Ginetta Junior car is a world away from that McLaren Artura. It's a very good little platform to learn GT racing, but mid-engined, 4 times the power, different world that he was in today, and it's a world that he seems to be very good at thriving in.
Absolutely. Very, very excited to see him back in the car tomorrow, and also very excited to see Callum in the car as well for race 2. Okay, let's move on to the prototypes. Danny Soufi, reigning champion, of course, coming in. We thought that one was going to be likely as well, Andy, but yeah, he did a really, really great job to take the first win, but wasn't, you know, we did think there was a chance that Lawrence Hare, he looked quick at one point, that Lawrence Hare might come back at him, but Danny just taking the win as he needed to.
It was sort of the exact opposite of the GT4s, really. GT4 we expected to be very close, wasn't as close as we thought it would be. Prototypes, Danny Soufi, in the end, had a run for his money in the closing stages there, and that's the joy, as Adam and I discussed during the race, of that sort of handicap system with the pit stops, making the quicker drivers spend longer in the pit lane, guaranteed us a bit of a grandstand finish. And actually, although he came out of the pit still with a sizable lead, that lead then kept coming down and down and down. Had the race been 10 minutes longer, could have been even closer. So tomorrow will be interesting. We're expecting very different conditions tomorrow. I think the prototypes, that will affect them probably more than the GT categories. Will Danny still be out on top? I don't know, but I hope it will be as close as it was today.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point. Tomorrow we're expecting it to be a little bit closer, I guess, and for Danny to be challenged a bit more. Of course, it rained here last year in Estoril, and Danny was how do I say this? He succumbed to the conditions somewhat in one of the races. Is that fair to say? But yeah, so we're expecting rain tomorrow, and prototypes once again will give us a show, I'm sure.
Your diplomacy is immaculate, I must say. Yes, it's going to be a very different dynamic tomorrow, not just because of the weather, but also because of the drivers that start the race. You're going to have a lot of gold and silver drivers, even a Le Mans class winner starting that race. I think the first half is going to be a dogfight. The pit window is going to throw a cat among the pigeons, and then we'll see how many feathers fly.
Amazing. Well, I'm looking forward to it. And then finally, the GTs, of course, we just had them on the podium a moment ago. How do I sum that one up? Crazy? Is that a fair word to use, Andy?
Crazy, eventful, unpredictable. All in all, though, very exciting. I mean, that's 2 words, but I'll cheat because I think it's worth it. Fantastic race. A great advert, as I said in commentary, for multi-class racing. You've got cars that generate their lap times in completely different ways, and drivers who I don't think were really thinking about their class position. They just wanted to try and win the race overall. And hey, as a neutral, no complaints here. That was fantastic racing. Got a bit physical at times, but nothing too untoward. And, you know, that's the kind of racing GT Winter Series provided most of last season, really. We've kicked off in fine fashion. That was the highlight of the day, no doubt. And there is no reason to suspect anything different tomorrow. In the rain, maybe those Cup cars, the Lamborghinis in particular, might struggle a bit. They are notoriously tricky to drive in slippery conditions. That might put it back in the balance of the GT3s. But going forward through the rest of the season, that is going to produce, I think, continuously some of the best racing of these weekends.
And I don't know about you, Adam, but I'm quite excited to see what Kenneth High can do tomorrow as well. Of course, today, not particularly the race that he would have wanted to have, but of course the reigning champion, so excited to see what he can do. Who else is your eye on?
Well, so for race 3, yes, you're quite right. I'm interested to see what Kenneth does. Of course, Moritz Viskirchen will be in the car for sprint race 2, and that's going to be compelling because Moritz has done a lot of contemporary GT racing over the last several years. Who else is my eye on? Oh, that's a big question. Andreas Bog Sorensen has been the X factor so far this weekend. More of the same, please, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. More of the same tomorrow. Okay, final question to both of you. I did this to you last year, so you should know that it's coming. Highlight from the day. Andy, I'm going to come to you first, so Adam's got a minute to think.
That's not fair. I hope in Portimao you go to him first.
I will.
Can that be arranged? The first 10 minutes of the GT race, just so unpredictable, so topsy-turvy, so many places a change of position at a track where supposedly overtaking is quite a challenge. That was proper racing, and yeah, I go with Adam. I want more of that.
All right, you've had time to think. Coming to you, highlight of the day.
I'm going to give a kind of broad shout out to the day's newcomers, whether it's someone like Hart, who is brand new to a GT4 car, someone like Oscar Rinzovic, who is brand new to racing full stop and has probably logged more miles at a racetrack today than he has over the rest of his life combined. The fact that he was in amongst it and getting involved, that's great. And that's one of the things the GTWinterSeries and the entire package as a whole is built on. Opportunities for experienced drivers and newcomers alike. And more often than not, it's a brilliant recipe.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure the GEDLICH team will be very, very happy with the way that the first day has gone. It has been fantastic. It is very, very good to be back. And the best part is more racing tomorrow, even more racing tomorrow with the 2 races in the GTs and the GT4s and the one more race to go in the prototypes. Lots of racing, so make sure you join us tomorrow and we will see you then.
Pushing it down, racing. They both go deep into the corner.